States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, there's a couple things off the bat for the agenda. Number 6 on the consent, we're going to move to the legislative business. And also, for the list of additions, add Kathy Moniz' resignation. And were there other additions? Brian, you wanted to move 5 from the consent agenda because you have a list of people to fill this committee with?
Yeah, I
Okay.
guess that would be
Yeah, I mean, it's not like it's a long conversation, but at least.
right. And I figured if anyone had any questions or things
Yeah.
they wanted me to look at as well.
And we were going to add Joe's resolution.
Yeah, what's it called?
Yesterday we put it in there.
Yeah, we're looking at March 27th.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just talked to him before the meeting. Yeah, okay, so also a resolution from the village attorney regarding the code definitions.
Yep.
And is there anything else?
Huguenot Street.
Huguenot Street, thank you.
Zoning definitions. North Chestnut Street.
I moved to approve.
Wait, hold on.
Oh, you're not ready yet?
Yeah. Proposed resolution of parking spaces from the west side of North. So, did we get the resolution for Grove, and is that
We're gonna
gonna
add
be
it.
included?
We're gonna add it tomorrow.
Okay. I'm good.
So is that it? All right, Sally's moved to accept the agenda, I'll second. For those watching at home, that was a fire department siren. If you like sirens, please volunteer with the fire department. You can call 255-0130 and hear them to your heart's delight. So public comment, who would like to go first?
Wait, we didn't vote.
Huh? Oh, we didn't vote, I'm sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Sorry.
No, thank you, Katie, for catching that. Public comment? There's only Don and Josie, really. Josie, go ahead.
Thank you for this opportunity. In the past few days, the board has been copied on email correspondence between me and Maurice Whiteman, the chairman of the Village Planning Board, regarding the escrow expense proposed to be charged in my special permit application for Moxie Cupcake. I believe that the proposed escrow expense of almost $5,000 in a simple site plan review of a reuse of an existing building that has been used in such a way for many years in the past and is currently, with the exception of minor aesthetic changes, is completely set up for the use that I'm suggesting now. Apparently, on this application, in a 2-week period, the village's consulting engineer billed 17 hours reviewing my simple site plan, totaling almost $1,900. And although at the last planning board meeting, a complete list of required site plan modifications was agreed upon, I am told by the chair that he estimates additional billing of $650, which apparently anticipates 5 to 6 hours more work. I have to say that I would be hard pressed to say that I spent 17 hours on my own application and site plan in 2 weeks, which is essentially an existing conditions plan at this point. The engineer's memo refers to various quote-unquote requirements of the code, which are in fact not legally required for this application, a matter which I had to address with the consulting attorney in order to correct, and for those conversations I was also charged. I also note that the engineer's second memo is essentially a restatement of his first, except to the extent that he acknowledges that certain requests have been complied with, and yet again inaccurate statements are made as to the requirements of the code. Much of the attorney's billing, which totals almost $1,200, is related to conversations and research which were necessary to confirm that initial comments were in fact inaccurate. And I've been told that the attorney estimates an additional $800 on this application. In my opinion, the escrow billing in this matter seems to be objectively out of proportion with the nature of the review. With a simple Google search, because I love Google searches, I have found provisions of other Ulster County codes which limit site plan review in any circumstance to $2,000. I have also found a study done in a Westchester municipality that indicated that out of 54 site plan applications since 2008, only 6 of them were charged over $3,000, and those exceptions had significant legal issues associated with it. And also of the remaining 54 applications, only 64% of them were under $1,000. This is in a county that I think we'd all expect the fees to be higher, not lower. I also use my own experience dealing with this process 2 years ago. When making the same change of use application, it cost me between $400 and $600. That would mean that between that application and this one, the appropriate level of review has somehow increased by more than 10 times. In addition to those examples, I need water. In addition to those examples, it is my understanding that the fees sought in my application are about 5 times higher than any review fees charged in any other change of use application in the village in the last year. Although I do not have that info on hand tonight, I've requested the details on those applications and I hope to have them for you soon pursuant to a FOIL request I filed this morning. When I was first asked about 3 weeks ago to replenish the escrow account, my inquiries as to why it was costing so much were dismissed, and I was told I had to do it if I wanted the review process to continue. The chair did accept an additional $2,000 instead of the $3,000 that they asked for, which I was thankful for, which they added to the $1,000 escrow balance. Yesterday I was asked to give an additional $1,600 at a time when my escrow balance of $3,000 had been untouched and with no bills yet presented by either consultant. I requested again, after requesting at our last meeting, that I receive copies of bills and for the board to respectfully consider the additional escrow replenishment. I have been dismissed yet again by the chairman as refusing to obey policy and have been told as of this afternoon that no further review of my application will be done until I give the village an additional $1,600. It is my opinion that the record of the last planning board meeting clearly indicates that no further engineering review is required, and that the board very clearly identified the factual issues which are important to its review. Therefore, I do not understand why the controversy of consultant fees should prevent the matter from being heard. Even if the planning board wanted to take the position that the escrow issue would have to be resolved before approval, there's no reason to stop the review. This is even more offensive given the fact that the meeting scheduled for the 19th is a public hearing which I and the village have gone to the trouble and expense of noticing. Nothing about the consulting issues has any bearing on the value of public comment on this project. And maybe more importantly, if we are prevented from even being on the agenda, we have no way of hearing the position of the entire planning board as to the status of the application. I also note that at the time of the request for additional escrow, which was yesterday, since there were no bills presented and a full $3,000 in escrow, there was no risk of non-payment, and if Mr. Whiteman had taken seriously my legitimate concerns about the fees, there would have been absolutely no harm done to the consultants at that time. I'm also concerned with the fact that both your code and the memorandum of understanding that applicants are required to sign, which I signed, indicate that additional escrow replenishment is a matter for consideration by the entire board and not just a unilateral decision by the chair. Even if the chair is authorized to make such decisions, that shouldn't relieve him or the board of the obligation to exercise reasonable control over its consultants. Apart from the fact that I'm a local small business owner being put through this, I also have a general concern that you as a village board should share, and that is, even if these consultant bills can somehow be justified as the amount of work necessary to do this review, which I would find unbelievable, it is still a case of the tail wagging the dog. The planning board should be exercising a level of control over the consultants rather than being dictated by them. In other words, if $5,000 is too much for a review of a change of use application, which in my opinion it is, and a fee I nor many other small local businesses could not pay, then the consultant should be told that, and they should do a level of review that's appropriate, rather than having them dictate an open checkbook for a small business. Personally, I'm also very saddened and very disappointed that my serious concerns about the ability to withstand the planning board process seems to have been viewed by Mr. Whiteman as an attack on his authority or on him personally. He has been dismissive and condescending of me and my concerns in meetings, telephone conversations, and email messages as if this were an adversarial proceeding in which I wasn't capable of formulating my own arguments. He has insinuated that he cannot give me preferential treatment when not at any time I've ever asked for it, and in my opinion, in an effort to avoid any appearance of preferential treatment, Mr. Whiteman appears to have gone to the extreme in requiring a heightened review that goes far beyond what is necessary in this matter. My only purpose in being here tonight is to let you know that my concerns are legitimate and these expenses threaten the success, not just of my application, but of my business. A business that sells organic, fair trade, and local products, that employs local kids, that supports local charities and events almost always, and is trying to move from one tenant location to another and reinvigorate a site that has been vacant for almost 2 years. I'm trying to have the opportunity to make this site beautiful and a place the village can be proud of. I love the village, I love being a part of it, both personally and commercially. I'm not a squeaky wheel looking to make a problem. I'm not a lawyer, and I promise you that I haven't been coached. These are my concerns, and all I'm asking is that they be reviewed and considered without my application being held hostage. I deserve to be on the agenda Tuesday night, and if there's anything that this board can do to encourage that, I will truly appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joseph.
Awesome.
And
Absolutely.
you're not the first to voice concerns like this, so the most thorough and articulate.
Thank you.
There's been,
And that's me.
yeah, exactly.
I've been told it's not, but it's completely me.
I hope you understand that there is a level of checks and balances involved.
I absolutely
And
understand.
I recognize you said encourage to get on the agenda next week. I'm glad you recognize that we can't actually get you there.
Absolutely.
But just in case anyone might
Yep.
be confused.
I understand.
And honestly, if it was just you, I probably would put that on the back burner as an aberration. But because I've heard several comments in roughly the same kind of vein, concern or question about the escrows or how we're billing them or what, our process, even down to little things like I just realized one applicant had come to me with a check that she had gotten and said, well, it says on the check that, please see attached itemized bill, and we hadn't sent the itemized bill along with it.
Right.
So Katie scrambled to, make sure that kind of hole was plugged. I met with Kurt, the director of planning, this morning for one of what's going to be a series of meetings about our planning board process, big picture, as in terms of who's handing what paper to who, and are we internally dealing with it well, including escrows and why we have them, because it's only in the last decade that the village does. It was set up in, I think, 2005, 2006 on the advice of a prior village attorney. So there's not much action we can take, though obviously you have a public forum, it's on camera, the press is here, so the issue's live.
Right.
And though I don't know if it would impact your application specifically, and I'm sorry to have to say this, it just could be, if there's bad process, you just maybe want to last to have to go through a bad process.
I understand.
If it's good process and a misunderstanding, we'll figure that out later, but, yeah, it's one of those things, it's not much, I can't give you much answer, and I don't know if anyone else had a comment.
I'm not even looking.
And I know you weren't
for
looking
answers.
for it,
Yep,
you just
I
needed
understand.
your day in court, so to speak, to
Absolutely.
speak to the board, yeah.
Yes. I'd much rather sing to you than read or just to speak.
Maybe next time, maybe next meeting, come and sing for us.
Might we ask, is it appropriate to ask our planner? I know this has come up before, but our planner to review all escrow charges, all fees that people are asked to pay, and make a report and recommendations to us.
Is that appropriate, Kurt?
A report and recommendation based upon review of this and other applications?
In general, I have heard often, and I know we have touched on it occasionally, that the fees that people are required to pay should be reviewed.
Well, there is, yes, and I'm looking at the code section right now. It's very specific, and it was amended as recently as 2011. And it has, the planning board chairman is to review or audit the charges before the escrow deposit is returned with an accounting of, namely the statements of billing from our consultants, in this case, legal and engineering. So as far as my own review, I'm not sure what I could do in review of those charges. In other words, I'm not sure when the purpose would be
Well, in general, not in this particular instance, but in general, we didn't have you in 2011. now we do, are the charges that are made by the planning board, for various functions, are they within reason? Or should they be altered? Or should they be adjusted depending upon what is required? I mean, there's a big difference if Don is building a brand new house and I'm doing something very simple. I would expect that if he's doing excavation and gonna put in a pool with his new house and all of this other stuff, that what would be required for his review is larger
Yes.
than a minor thing. And so that's what I mean, is that possible to do?
Well, when it comes down to it, I guess that would mean reviewing charges and questioning consultants or not paying them for that. I'm uncomfortable with that because I don't know what,
Maybe there's
I
a-
looked at invoices today on this very matter, and I wouldn't be able to say that this is, that one or another charge is improper. I would not be able to do that.
Yeah,
Are you talking about like on a application by application basis, or do you mean as like a structural analysis? Like who do we turn to for certain questions? Or do you mean, is this
Do I need
overcharging?
an engineer to look at my roof if I'm putting a new roof on, for which I need a building permit?
Well, no, but we don't use escrow for building
Okay,
permit review.
there's one thing. Okay, now the building permit fee, is it within line with surrounding communities
I believe ours are lower.
or lower?
For building
Okay.
permits, yes.
Okay,
And as well as our administrative fees, which are the non-refundable administrative fees going into the general fund, those also need to be updated, and it's something that we've generally talked about as something that I ought to do for the village.
but is there a way, or could you suggest who we should ask? A way to say, okay, if it's a simple site review, does it need review by X, Y, and Z consultants? Do you see what I'm asking?
Yes, I do, yes. And
Like-
actually, the only thing I can say is, and I think it's best to address the case at hand. I'm very much looking forward to reuse of that site and a happier home for Moxie, because I believe the 215 Main is not optimal in several regards, and this site is much better. So it's a win-win all around, and then of course we got to the planning process. What I did was, as soon as I was informed about the project, I spoke with Joe on this application about it, and then met after work with Joe and Josie to say, how's the cooperation from the property owner? And of course I was informed that rather indifference would describe the property owner who signs on to this application. So here, the owner has successfully, and masterfully I might add, placed the entire burden on this potential tenant, and doesn't seem that interested, as far as I can tell, in whether the property is rented or not.
Okay.
And without that motivation and without participation and investment on the part of the owner, that puts a prospective tenant and the planning board in a very difficult position. And that's exactly what's happened here.
And is there any remediation for that?
Well, I'm going to pursue some of the prior conditions of site plan approval. For example, 1993 Peak Performance Sports, things that were not done. It's not too late, even though it's 20 years later, to enforce those things that were to have been done. Okay, that has placed a further burden on our applicant here. Because again, the owner has done nothing to rectify these things, so I'm going to have to seek to commence an enforcement proceeding to do these things. And I certainly hope that in doing so, the owner does not put their new tenant in a difficult position.
Is that, I don't know how to ask this, in a neutral way.
So don't ask it in a neutral way.
Oh,
Just ask it.
okay. Does that, some of the review processes that have resulted in some of this that Mrs. Ariel has spoken about, is it because of the lack of what hasn't been done by the landlord that had to have been reviewed? In other words, can some of the burden of charges that required the engineer in fact be attributed to the owners?
Without any doubt.
I disagree to a
Dave?
point. I disagree to a point. I don't know if it's my place to say so.
You
but
had
I-
said
but I-
some.
Yeah, but
I
I'm-
disagree. Yeah.
You had said some, I didn't, so I answered yes, indeed, some,
Some.
not the lion's share, not all of it,
But
some,
some of it.
absolutely.
Would you agree with that, Josie? Some?
Perhaps, yes. One real case. I mean,
Right.
again, when you look at the site plan that they asked me to submit, when you look at the changes that they asked me to make, I've been doing everything they've asked me to do. You know, when you look at the application itself, the biggest issue, in my opinion, is the curb cut that is there for the drive-through. I had inquired about the drive-through. I didn't put it in the original plan because I was going to see if it could be done. They wanted it in the original plan. I put it in the original plan. The issue, I guess, is that curb cut was supposed to be not there. It was supposed to be made into a real, how I understand it, made into a sidewalk per se. The curb cut is not supposed to be
That's
there.
a good way to
correct?
describe it,
That's exactly correct, and
Okay, good.
furthermore, 20 years ago, it was asked that the applicant close it under the express conditions of the New York State Department of Transportation. That means coordinate that closing and the new curbing that would eliminate with DOT, don't just take it on yourself, and yes.
So this is an enforcement issue that is 20 years old being laid upon a new tenant.
Well, actually, I'm going to pursue the owner for that. However, it's gotten to the point where what was approved in 1993 was never fully implemented. And some of those features, now what we have is a new site plan proposing, for example, the way of, the physical method by which you prevent people from driving through the drive-through and using an access point, which is an additional access point when it's not meant to be. So what kind of barrier do you put up? Well, the plan approved in 1993 showed a curbed and landscaped area and some fencing where kayaks, of course, were stored when peak performance was around. Now what we have is, we had a discussion over it, and I don't know, I looked at the most recent plan, which we received for the public hearing, and it doesn't have a detail, I don't think, for exactly what form it will take, but it's inconsistent with what was approved previously. So this has been, this is a very, given the neglect of the site and its conditions and lack of enforcement in the past, this makes it certainly more difficult for an applicant who does not have the cooperation of the property owner, who typically would be highly motivated to rent a piece of property that's valuable and has been fallow for some time.
May I make a statement?
Without asking for an answer, is there moving room for you to work with Josie on this problem and get it straightened out?
Yes, in fact, I saw this coming because I was told that, that the owner was not, the applicant was, Moxie was, in a sense, by itself. Whatever improvements were gonna be required to that property were gonna be required of the applicant. The owner was not going to participate in much of anything except perhaps a coat of paint on the building. Now, then it became known, of course, that there were actual code violations.
So the owner has been attending the planning board meetings, I understand?
Maybe, I wouldn't know, and it was certain he was not identified. I thought that some of the statements I made at the planning board would have perhaps provoked him to wish to speak.
Josie, you had something to add?
Yeah, I just would like to, in my opinion, the reason I agree to a point with Mr. Lala about that being the only issue that has jacked up the price in this application, when you look at the bills and you look at the site plan, I disagree to a point because that curb cut is a straightforward, you're either gonna penalize me for that being there and make me do that curb cut, or you're not. And from the beginning, it seemed okay that at least that, the discussions were made about me doing a planter there. I mean, I want to make it beautiful. I would I would make it in a seating area or do whatever I need to do there to make it beautiful. I'm not going to just throw up a chain or whatever. It's because that's not me. I couldn't handle that in my shop. And that one little incident cannot account for the billing that has been done on this. It just can't, in my opinion. It has been,
I wasn't suggesting that it was,
No,
I was
you-
answering
but-
Sally's question.
no,
about-
but she asked, can that,
Yeah,
can
is
Was it a
there-
contributing factor? And I answered
But
that,
no,
yes, it was.
my question, Josie, was to Kurt, is there room, from your understanding of the problems we're talking about and that Josie has raised, to work with her and work with the planning board to get this straightened out?
Well, no, I attempted before as soon as Joe came to me about the application, I provided information and I said, if you don't have a cooperative landlord, I said, we're gonna do the best we can, but please know, there are things that are going to be required, and they should not be required of an applicant who doesn't, this is not necessarily, as far as I know, and it's not really my business, but it's not that it's a purchase of the property. It's not even rent with an option to buy. So that makes it very difficult. And it was said to me up front by Joe and Josie that there really wasn't much of a budget for physical site improvements. And I said, okay, well, we have our work cut out for us in front of the planning board because the applicant signed on to this. In other words, the owner signed on to to give consent to the applicant to come to the planning board. As you know, that's a prerequisite in every case, in every community. You cannot come forth with a planning board application unless the owner has at least signed off. And but apparently it was all the work and the lifting, the investment, the time was all going to be undertaken by the applicant. And I said I'd work with it the best we could, but I said, please beware, there are going to be requirements regarding the site. In no way did we seek to hold it to today's standards as in a pre-existing property. We did treat it that way, and there was a whole section of requirements that all parties agreed were not relevant. At the first time, I was told that the drive-through was important to the business, so I said, I understand, it's not my business, it's yours, we'll go forward proposing that, and then the recommendation was to refer it to the Department of Transportation, and then we had another iteration of the plan which removed.
And this was just one issue with this application, which doesn't erase.
No.
Everything you said is true, but it doesn't erase. You're both right. Is what I'm saying. It doesn't erase the larger issue of the escrow
Right.
system we have,
Remember,
because whatever system we have is causing anger and frustration and whatnot among more than just Josie. So it's something that Kurt and I will be proposing an amendment to the board in the next few weeks. We haven't set a schedule, but
after that
we obviously need to do something differently than we're doing now, because
Well,
it's
After
not
that meeting.
working what we have.
Okay.
So,
But I wanna go the other
Sure.
way and finish them, Brian. I guess my question is this, Kurt. If in prior life, the planning board stated that something should be done, okay, must be done, and it has not been done by the owner, isn't the enforcement the planning board's responsibility and not the new?
No, it's actually my office's, our
Well-
new consolidated department in planning, zoning, and code enforcement. It's our responsibility, my responsibility, and now that I've presented the facts to the planning board, they had asked me to investigate it, I did, and we will be taking action.
Okay.
And it will either be corrected or will play out in municipal court.
I'd like to make one more statement about just because it has been brought up.
Because
If you don't mind. Go
Brian,
ahead.
Brian had a question
Yeah.
for
Go ahead, I'm
comment
sorry.
first
Thanks.
before you.
So have we at all seen the bills? Has anyone seen the bills?
Today, yes.
One was received by mail tonight, one was received by email. Josie's actually received a copy of them, and while we were sitting at the table, I emailed them to each of you. So
Oh,
you
that's
can
what
review
was
them.
vibrating in my pocket. Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, Josie's bills are in there.
I was like, okay. So this is aside from the email that was sent with the two totals, because I believe I saw an email earlier today that kind of outlined totals on
Right.
this. Is this like detailed outlined as to how the hours were spent? Is that
Yeah.
what's
It's
usually?
an actual copy of the invoices. When I receive the invoices, I process them through our escrow process, because we needed a replenishment, I sent Josie a
Right.
certified letter, but I also, for convenience and timings, scanned the letter and the invoices and emailed them to her.
Sure.
So each of you, and as I said, I just emailed each of you
Right.
a copy of that, so that for your review.
Okay.
I actually could bring them up at the table if that's the will of the board.
So what, and the replenishment, when was that required? When did you first get that email?
Requested, yesterday.
Okay.
Yesterday it was an estimate, today I physically had invoices.
Okay.
Right, well, of the balance,
Right,
not the
absolutely.
replenishment. Replenishment, we don't have balances yet, there are estimated costs yet to be billed.
Okay.
And so those numbers are, the billing so far reflects about $3,000, and they want an additional $1,600 from me.
So, but that wasn't billed yet. That the funding wasn't billed. She had 3,000 in her account.
Yes.
Yes,
We didn't receive bills until today.
correct.
So I guess the attorney and the engineer said, we've done this much work. Now you're gonna have to replenish. We haven't billed for it yet, but we were estimating you've done this much work, and now we have to move forward. Is that how this
Yeah.
process
Yes,
works?
in fact, our code actually provides for, I can read it, I don't know how much, I don't wanna
It's
go on.
check
and on.
section 21266.
Yes.
So
And-
we can all look it up
Okay,
later.
well, what it is, it's very detailed, but at any time, and the reason that I had met with the mayor and asked for that meeting was right after our last Tuesday evening planning board meeting, where Moxie was the only application on the agenda, and I said, clearly there needs to be some discussion of really beyond escrow, but really into, in other words, it was a sort of a breakdown of the process. It's something that we should keep from recurring again. And I'm not so naive after 2 decades in this business to realize that who really wants or enjoys going to a planning board and investing time and money in it? However, it's awfully difficult if you're a tenant who signed a lease, and instead of providing an open-ended time to get approvals, you have this incredibly tight time frame, and everyone wants this site reoccupied and reoccupied by Moxie.
Right.
However, that didn't stop the meeting from really not from breaking down a bit.
Right.
How long? I can't remember. How long was the meeting?
An hour and, almost 2 hours.
Yeah, it
For
says.
just your application.
Just-
I mean, it says an hour and a half for attending the meeting.
Kurt, you
It's
you
char- it's
raised a
charged by the
question and
Yeah.
maybe.
Okay, I'm sorry. No.
Go-
Do you mind?
Go ahead.
So the one other thing I want to ask is basically, does it make sense to apply a cap to this? And also, I mean, because the two problems I've heard with the planning process are, number one, it takes too long. You get stuck putting in a lot of money and a lot of time, and you only have a very, you're starting a business, you want to get in and you want to get moving. So that's one of the problems is time, and the other thing is the funding that goes into it. And I know a lot of it is conversations with the attorney. So does it make sense to put a cap on these kind of things as in other municipalities? And is there a way that we can?
Well, it was mentioned when Josie spoke that there was one case where they cap it at $2,000. So the only problem with that is that we expect in our reformulated B3 district to have large projects. If we cap that at 2,000,
Right.
first of all, it would be unfair for those paying for 100% of their costs where they equal 2,000.
Just
let's
think
say.
Woodland Pond.
Right.
You couldn't,
Right.
There's no way we could cap
Right, and
$2,000
then
Sure.
in fees.
what you have then
Right,
is
right.
the.
That was my example earlier, using Don as a developer and me.
I see.
The whole point, he was doing a much bigger project.
Yes. When
And
you
My
have then.
example was change of use site.
And you're
application.
changing
use.
New
Right.
development.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So
the
there's
point I
just
was
different
trying to make.
categories. you know.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah,
Like
no,
we've split these hairs before in Little Village, right? With the laws last year, no 2 primary residences in 1 parcel, no things that work in other communities. We have to be more fine grained.
Right.
So I could see it slicing, change of use, single family home, zoning change is one thing, and Kurt would know the categories more than I, but that might be plausible as well. And yeah.
Well,
I'm
I
just spitting
I
fire.
would like to help in some way because to relive this over and over is difficult for all involved. First and foremost, the applicants presenting projects before us, and even me, if I want to, if I want to walk through the doors of the establishments that I'm reviewing as a customer in the future. I mean, it comes down to that. I mean,
Well, it
in other
also
words, just to
is
give
a
you the breadth of it.
disincentive to small businesses and to the encouragement of small businesses in our community.
Yes.
And that's
And that's
a
something,
primary concern.
that's something we've been able to get away with for a lot of years.
But
Because when you think about it, they're very, I mean, we have a 0.2% vacancy rate for residential. And besides the peak performance place, I mean, I can think of one, I'd have to stretch to think of two, let alone 3 vacant storefronts in the entire village of New Paltz.
but Joe,
But,
as
so kind of, I think, and that's because of SUNY and the throughway exit, so we can get away with being with charging more, just being more of a pain in the butt to
Right, because
get
people
through.
want to be.
Because they're gonna fight harder again.
Right.
But that doesn't mean, but maybe we're not getting the kind of best and brightest because, you know,
well, I guess I
I'm
have,
tired of losing bakeries to Rosendale, is all I'm saying.
I have 2 concerns. One is, what I understand is that there was no accounting for the money expended before the demand for an increase in escrow was made.
Mm-hmm.
For better
So-
or for worse, that's consistent with our code.
And that has to
on
be
it.
changed.
Okay.
And that's part of the list
That-
we've gotten together.
That just has to be changed. You can't
Mhm.
say to somebody, give me $2,000.
And $1,000 more, and I'll tell you later.
Okay.
Now I want more,
Yeah.
without saying what
in
it's
other words, in other
for.
words, having the invoices in hand.
Well,
Or-
I think if and when, and I mean, you know better the process than I do, but in general, if I'm asking for more money, I better be able to tell you what I spent the first amount on.
The first thought, yes, the first thought I have, as a way to avoid that, is asking if our consultants would like to remain consultants to the planning board or the zoning board or perhaps even other boards, that they must cater to us in the way they invoice. They would not be able to do what they are likely to normally do, which is monthly invoicing. They would need to cater to us and provide invoicing on demand and realize that it's going to be it's going to be coincident with applications. Otherwise, our code calls for the suspension of review, which obviously is untenable and something that, of course, you'd probably ask that we investigate and correct. So what we need to do is have almost on-demand invoicing, which is not out of the realm of possibility. It's for those consultants that would like to work with our village. And then we'd have information for applicants, and of course they're deserving of that information. And then that might help some decide whether they'd like to continue or whether the weather charges have mounted as a result of contact from an applicant's professional to one of our professionals. They'd be able to see a listing of whether, was it telephone calls, was it the number of revisions, was it one thing or another. And so
And it'd be an easy enough thing to put into the code, conditions for the invoices. What information we require of our consultants and things, you know, that's all, it's a sentence in the code.
It could be a process, it doesn't have to be in the code. It could be
Yeah.
a
It
policy.
it should be.
Well, you want it there.
Well, because we have, the way we have
I
section
know
212.
how we have
Okay.
it.
Then that it needs to be corrected. In other words, they're,
Mhm.
right, you've just explained to me that it's not suitable the way it is now.
Right. And the other overall thing that is coming out to me is that all too often, perhaps, enforcement issues have not been dealt with at the time. And then as a consequence from what you said, Kurt, 20 years later, in this instance, a tenant with a viable business is being held up because somebody didn't do and didn't make sure it was done at the
That's-
appropriate time.
That's correct. It's almost like land use issues in many cases never go away, and that's in a way why the state requires us to keep our files forever on land use matters in perpetuity. And it's extremely frustrating for all, again, most for the applicant presenting to us,
Mhm.
but if I had hair, I would be turning gray over that kind of thing, yeah.
Is there a way that you can recommend? Say I'm told I have to do X. and I don't do it, and 20 years later, you find out it isn't done, is there a way or an appropriate process that I can be fined heavily for that?
I believe that we could adjust our schedule of fines. I believe that we could do
Okay.
that to accomplish.
Because it seems to me that's the only fair way to go.
Yes. And
Can you deny somebody the right to rent until they straighten out what they're supposed to have done?
You mean what the owner is? Oh, okay, but well, sometimes, of course, the applicant and owner are together submitting the application, but the one ending up being punished would be the applicant rather than the property
No,
owner.
no, I wanna go the other way.
Okay.
I'm saying 20 years ago, something was supposed to have been done, and it wasn't. And for whatever reason, it wasn't made to occur. At what juncture should we be able, or you be able, or the building department be able to say, you must do that or you can't rent it?
Yes, well, that goes right back to code enforcement. It goes back to code
Okay.
enforcement. And by the way, I should add, just in the interest of full disclosure here, some of the things that were supposed to have been done were done, and then they were undone at some unknown point between then and now. For example, the fence for kayaks, which is obviously there's no longer a need for at that site. That's not something I prioritize as a code enforcement, but the plantings that were there to let folks know when they're walking down the street that they don't need to look in that direction to see if a car is coming out of a drive-through exit or anything of that nature. Those things were undone, and a path was cleared for the drive-through again by the owner at some point. I don't know when.
But in violation of a previous,
That's correct. So there you'd have yes, they would have maybe initially complied and then later.
They just did it without
violated.
asking us.
Yeah.
and what do you do about that?
Well, that's a violation.
You gotta
too.
wait until you find out. Unless you wanna memorize all the site plans in the village.
Well, in general, it would be a violation because you generally, to change a site that has a site plan approved for it, you would generally need to return to amend that site plan, even if it wasn't with a prospective tenant in mind. Even if it was the approved site plan, and to change it, you'd need to amend it, which of course means returning to the planning board.
So we can get to other thing, is there room within our discussion and Josie's request and what you know, is there room to work to get this straightened out?
Well, I personally believe, and it's not my job to speculate, but that.
Then
that-
don't speculate, just tell me yes or no.
Well,
Maybe.
okay, you mean to bring this application to a successful approval? Well, I certainly believe so, yes, and that's what I expressed, at least in words and hopefully action since then. I expressed to our applicant that is my interest, and that is what I want, and I understand there needs to be flexibility, but I said it's an awfully big burden to have as a prospective tenant and an owner that by all appearances is rather indifferent about reuse of the
Do
site.
you need any action from this board to support working on this, or?
No, I've been, again, I had prepared recommendations and the board heard them, and some may have been discussed more than others, but I accept that. Not all of my recommendations are gonna be embraced by the planning board in each case, so I have no issue there.
Okay.
And
Thank
the
you
bigger
for
picture, we will have a proposal in the near future.
Can I just end with one thing?
Please,
So
yes.
I wanna articulate, we spoke about a lot of different things, and I wanna, articulate, my response to a couple of things, before I forget them. I just wanna reiterate my real issues with what has happened with this application. One, I do believe the fees associated with this type of application and this type of very simple site plan are too high. And again, and in my understanding, Mr. Lavala says all these things that has to be done. It's mostly the curb cut, and all of the other things are very minor. They had to move in my opinion and in my understanding of your code, which I have read, and the process, almost everything that has been done in this case and has been said, and the reason that there's been so many reviews of this site plan and so many additions and so many of this and so much of that and so much talk about a DOT referral, which, what are they gonna tell you? A lot of cars on Main Street? What are you gonna do? You're not gonna let me be there? I mean, I just don't understand any of that, and most of what has been discussed and referred and suggested, in my opinion, has been things that are clearly in the code for new construction. All of this talk about screening and landscaping and this and that and DOT, in my opinion, again, in my understanding of the code, there are things that are reserved for new construction and didn't even have to be brought up in this application. And when it's all said and done, the only issue is this curb cut, which from the beginning, again, my understanding was that there was a very legal way to allow me to open and close off that access, which I will gladly do in both cases so that people don't go drive down and get stuck down there. Apparently that's an issue. Both sides, I will gladly barricade with a beautiful flower arrangement. So I cannot, in my mind, again, my understanding, I cannot see how $5,000 is spent on wondering how to enforce a curb cut that wasn't done properly 20 years ago. And there's no other things that really are changed. I would bring the site plan and a planter that was at the bottom of the sign wasn't in. Okay, so I call my engineer, please add the little planter on the bottom. We had a whole discussion about the screening in the back. There's trees there, it's been fine, I don't think anybody has complained, it's a bakery, it's not a hookah bar. Just over and over and over again, and even up until the last meeting, I don't know how many minutes was spent talking about a possible DOT referral, getting a traffic study done. I couldn't do that, and it seems preposterous to me that you would even suggest it. And so my contention is that everything that the consultants have spent their time on have been things that are not required in the code and that have been suggested by, I'm not quite sure, but I don't know if it's Mr. Lavala or the engineer or the lawyer, I'm not exactly sure, but things that should not have been suggested in the first place, in my opinion. And to back that up, when you get boiled down to it, if you listen to the meetings minutes of the last meeting, everything's fine and dandy, which it should have been in the first place. So that is, I wanted to reiterate my problems with the current bills. Again, I'll pay the current bills if I have to. I just want to get in the space and I need to move forward. It's costing me money to do this. That's my first contention. The second is the additional escrow amount. If you read the minutes from the last meeting, and as I stated, everything's been clearly consulted on. There's no additional consultation that they could possibly need to make to approve this, in my opinion. And to suggest that $1,600 more needs to be paid on this, I believe, is ridiculous for a local small business. So I don't want to go off on, and again, the owner too, I have to say, I don't see where that is really relevant to the application at hand. Really and truly, I don't see, if he is not willing to do certain things on his property for me. We made our own deal, he's gonna pay for me, yes. We made some other deals, but at the end of the day, what really needs to be changed with that site? Just the curb cut. What else? Very minor, a new thing that came is the existing propane tank wasn't usable anymore because it's been out of use for 2 years. So we had to move, they're gonna take that away, the propane company, we put 2 new tanks there. So the building inspector, again, I've been, she's been in the space, when I first looked at it, I had her in the space, asked her about potential problems, didn't seem to have any problems. The new tanks, I think, need a barrier or something like that. Okay, I mean, that's something that's new. And I think the handicapped ramp needs a rail. Fine, I'll do that too. It just doesn't add up. It just doesn't, I'm not building a 30-lot subdivision. I'm not scraping it off and putting a new building. I'm not changing it in any significant way. I'm trying to make it pretty and put some flowers out. $5,000 for that? I don't understand it. And so, again, just to reiterate, the existing money, I find I think is too high. The actual bills that I finally got today, the additional escrow amount requested, I think is absolutely preposterous. And overall, the notion that this is being treated as new construction and that I'm being disrespectful in some way for wanting to know why it's costing this much, if I'm articulating that the way I should. Those are the issues. I mean, I guess you can tell me if I'm wrong, but whether, in my opinion, there's no other changes to the space.
Well, remember that nobody here but me has probably even seen their site plan. So it's just, and we haven't seen the bills either, so just,
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Well,
so you know.
I'm stating, again, I'm only saying that because of Mr. Laval's comments about how much has to be done and how much we have to upgrade and how much we have to work, and how much the owner is not doing.
Josie, that's not what he was saying. He was answering my question,
But in the
regarding-
beginning of the statement, yeah.
what commitments the owner was
Oh, I
responsible
understand.
for
I understand.
prior to.
Right.
So he
Well,
wasn't picking
okay,
on
I'm
you.
not- wait, I'm gonna let's just,
May I ask a question?
let's act, unless it's urgent, we've been talking almost 45 minutes about this one topic.
You're the liaison to the planning board.
Mhm.
Will the 3 of you get this straightened out?
No, it's already being straightened out, yeah, so.
Please,
Thank you.
again, I stand by the 2 memorandums I wrote, which have nothing to do with escrow. We know that escrow is only allowable in the state for consultants. I'm your staff, okay? So this is as apart from escrow, but I stand by the memos I wrote, and I believe they were written to expedite the project, and they did not invoke those things that are indeed, and were agreed to be, specifically applied for cases of new site development. So I want to clarify that. I stand by my memos, and they were written with headings about how to expedite this, and how to avoid a referral to the county, and waiting for them to have their once monthly meeting. And once the proposal to utilize the drive-through was abandoned in the process, then I said that we don't need to refer to New York State Department of Transportation. So again, there are 3 professionals here. 2 are under the work under the auspices of escrow. 1 works for the village itself, and we're 3 different types of professionals: lawyers, engineers, and planners. And I stand by the memorandums I wrote on the project.
Well, thank you, and thank you for coming
Thank
out,
you.
Josie.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Any other public comment? Don, Mike?
You wish you went first?
Would you like to come up here, just the microphone, and get it to public access TV, of which I'm a fan?
You're the expert.
Yeah, I usually, I sit at home and my computer faces one way and the TV is the other way. And I usually have channel 23 on in the background with the meetings on. And every once in a while it's a, what did I just say?
My recommendation is a mirror.
Yeah, no, okay. A couple things on, I have a business in the area where you'd like to have a business, and I say save the cupcakes. Whatever can be done. I think if there is a fine that can be assessed for failing to do the curb cut, and it can be assessed 20 times, and those funds can be diverted to some of these fees, that might be a solution. Just a thought. I also think your consultants damn well better itemize their bills. That's an easy way to prevent this. Okay, I thought I heard that they were.
There's not going to be a cupcake drive-through, because that's a bad idea.
That's much.
Why? You could buy too many?
Oh yeah,
Oh,
just
okay.
pop in for a second and then get a dozen cupcakes.
So, and honey, if you're watching at home, we're getting a new house with a pool. Thank you, Sally.
Courtesy of
Thank you,
Sally.
Sally.
But you're paid.
Oh, whoa! You didn't say that. You didn't say that. Quick question. This is just anecdotal. Someone reminded me that Rosendale had consolidated in some way not too very long ago.
17 years ago,
Yeah, Kevin Cahill ran for mayor.
and they dissolved.
Yeah, I guess I haven't heard very much data about that experience. I have no idea if it was good, bad, or whatever. But I
Yeah, I guess it depends on who you talk to.
well, I know, we talk about Seneca Falls and a lot of other places. I haven't heard Rosendale being used in that
Well, in the old days, Don, the only way you could have consolidation was in this type of situation is for the village to dissolve and become a part of the town. Okay, and that's what Rosendale did because the law only provided that avenue for consolidation. Now the Citizen Empowerment Act, which is the new law, allows for many formulas, including a village town-wide with a village form of government, which
I'm just curious if there's anything to learn from that.
If you
I
want to
example.
find out about that, I think that the former mayor of Rosendale, when he existed, is now an attorney for the county
be happy.
law department, and I'm sure she'd be happy to discuss
And
it.
well, actually, I think the former mayor of Rosendale, who was the last mayor of Rosendale, before they dissolved, right after her, was claimed to be a performance artist or something, and actually has an exhibit. He claims that the dissolution of Rosendale is his conceptual art piece. And it's been exhibited in galleries around the world. I can't remember his name right now, but I can't remember what it's called. Something Rosendale.
Wait, wasn't it like
He
a
claims
joke of some sort?
Yeah,
like
he
a
ran as mayor.
art piece.
Yeah, it was right. It was an art piece, and he went. I don't know. I think he was full of crap.
Right, and then someone came into one of the meetings and was like, "Don't let this happen to you." Right? Didn't that
I
happen
don't know,
in one of the
something
joint
like that,
meetings?
Oh yeah, Robbie Walters came. Anyway, Don.
Looking into the future, there may be a village of New Paltz, there may not be. A consolidation may or may not happen. But in the interim, there is still a village, and the village does have interests, and you are our representatives. And when I see the joint meetings and the consolidation process in play, my sense is I see the town council using the process to really advance the interests of the town. And a couple examples would be, I know they have a big problem with Sewer 6, and that's the wastewater plant up by Ohioville Road. It's ongoing problems. It's expensive. It doesn't have the capacity, and a statement was made that one of the things they want to do in consolidation is hook that into the municipal sewer system. And what was termed as the municipal sewer system, I call the village wastewater plant, which was expanded just a couple, I don't know how many years ago, from 1.2 million gallons per day to 1.5 million gallons per day. So I wonder who's done the capacity studies that tell us whether we can handle any more wastewater from Ohioville Road or anywhere else.
We can't.
I suspect that.
We're
But
always at capacity with our sewer plant.
But that's just one of those things where I see some real advocacy on the part of the town to address issues of long standing for town residents. And to my personal perspective and point of view, I feel it's to the disadvantage of the current residents of the village. That's just my perspective. We can argue about that. But I guess when I watch the meetings, I don't see the village trustees responding to things like that. You know, there have been some bullying language on another topic, some bullying language on the subject of the police budget. And I'm not an analyst, but it appears that the other people in the room have been bullied because they have been, with the exception maybe of Gene Gallucci, they have been silent when these threatening statements have been made. And it goes back to my original comment, there is still a village, and you are right now representing the village. As you go forward and look at consolidation, it's fine to have, a lot of priority there, but the loyalty now has to be the interests of the village. And I don't see that when I see these comments and threats being made about shifting police money to either the residents or the businesses in the village. I would expect you to, I'm there at home, like shouting at the TV, and I would hope that
Well, I think
there'd be some
what
pushback.
she was saying was that they would either abolish the police force and then let the village residents pick it up, or she might have been referring to the improvement benefit district or. Right.
Well,
that we're talking about creating the downtown for the late night businesses who sometimes use amounts of police to deal with problems that occur during the late night.
yeah,
The
I understood
business
that.
zone.
But right, the business zone. But
Yeah.
one way or another, I mean, if the town chooses to do away with the police force, unfortunately, there's not much that the village board can do to stop
There's
it.
a
from-
lot that we can do to stop it.
Well, I mean, I think.
Did-
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I would say all we can do is deal with it on our own.
Okay.
But, I mean, maybe there's something.
I believe there are 3 issues that you raised.
I have another one, but we haven't got.
Okay, well, let me do the 3.
Sure.
As best I can. The village may appear to not have a position, but the recommendation is that we form a village town-wide government with a village form of government in place. Now, that can be difficult for some people who like a decentralized form of government. But we're all pretty confident that's what we're supporting. So when
No, we're not.
people, look at such shape.
Yeah, thank you.
That's known. There are 4 of us who support this. So that when statements are made about Sewer District 6, that is not necessarily an impact on the village as we know it now or in the future, because that kind of problem has to be resolved. It's a town-wide problem financially done, and that district owes the town general fund money. It's a complicated.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Which would become ours after consolidation.
No.
Yeah, okay, all right.
No,
I'm
no.
not going to grant you that.
No,
All right.
it remains.
Not the entire town would not be paying water and sewer
Yeah.
issues. Just the existing village and
Yeah.
a few users around it.
And the
So
users.
Don's right.
So,
It would
no,
become our problem.
but that's a
in terms of current
special
village users.
district that is unto itself and it is not hooked in to village water and sewer. District 6 is an autonomous sewer district with a little sewer plant that has major problems, and it is not a part of either the current village sewer system or the town part of the village sewer system. It's separate and unique, and so it's
Right.
gonna have to be examined very carefully.
Well, again, the statement was that after consolidation, we're going to hook it into our system.
Okay.
That
Right.
was a statement at a public meeting from the
Okay.
table.
You're addressing a different issue than what Don raised.
Hmm?
You're addressing a slightly different issue than what Don raised.
No, he's
So I
worried
just
that-
feel like they
that's
don't want
gonna
to
be
pay
our
their fair
problem.
share of the police, and they want to send us their poop.
Yeah.
And I don't see that as being a good deal for the village.
Well, if we consolidate, the police department is all of ours.
But that's
Okay.
you know that's a little bit offside though, because you're saying that right now we have the 2 square miles of the village and the 32 square miles of the town around us.
Mhm.
And somehow you seem to be saying that by moving the village border out to the edges, the issues that those of us who live in this 2 square miles are going to somehow be gone or be shared,
No,
and they're
I'm
not.
saying that you don't have one government holding an axe over the other government in a consolidation, okay?
But you also don't have
You
the other
want-
government to stop that axe,
Right.
because
You
there's no
have-
more village government.
Yeah.
You have one government, one policy-making body covering a police department, which right now covers all of us, and the village has no say at all. Okay, because it gave up its police department to the town.
Well,
Okay,
but
so-
But the point is well made that when Kevin Barry said at the meeting, it was not a policy debate. It was if you don't consolidate, it was a threat. As Don said, you don't do what I want. We're going to kill the police department and let the villagers pay for it. That's a threat, and it was an open threat,
But
and it's a
it's-
repeated threat. And I think that was a point that Don
And
raised. It was well
when
taken.
up until a couple of years ago, the village did its part and contributed to the police force by hosting it, by physically giving it space.
that's correct.
So that was our contribution.
No, it was
And-
in the town part, it wasn't our contribution.
That's actually a separate building owned by
Oh,
the town.
okay,
The
okay.
town owns half of this
But
building.
I, you know, the town has, under its auspices, has blessed the movement of the department from the downtown, where it was right next to the action, too far away, and I can only imagine that would have increased costs in some way.
That's
it
the
would
three
have-
$300,000 aberration you were concerned about, that was the cost. Okay?
Well, I don't see where it's in the interest of the village residents or the village businesses, and that was the third point. There was one council for one trustee, and it was Kevin Barry, who made the threat to defund the police, and was explained that the real purpose was the special district, was that we're going to create a special district where the businesses that are open between 11 p.m. and 4 a.m. would bear the equity, the financial burden, some additional financial burden for the cost of police. That would be the bars in the village. And returning to my original point, today, right now, they are your constituents. They are your constituents too. And when there's discussion about creating a new district which would cost these businesses, which you represent, which I'm sure pay taxes, I would expect someone from the village board to have had a problem with that and articulated it.
Do they pay
But once
taxes like to the amount of money? Like they pay very little taxes and make a lot of money for the amount of taxes that they pay,
And for the service they
and for
demand.
the services that they use. So I mean, I do agree with you that they are constituents, or at least their businesses may be within our area. They may not actually be our constituents, but I think that if, and I wanted to stop having comments, but I think that if you're using a large amount of services and everyone else has to pay for it and you're making money off of it, then maybe you should contribute a little bit more because you're benefiting from those more than the rest of your own.
According to the police
Well-
chief, the police resources are split almost exactly 50-50 between the town and the village.
That's not what the report showed.
That's what the chief told me, and it's about half the population.
He gave the information to the finance.
And I didn't want to have a big.
Right, yeah,
we get into debates
Done.
and discussions.
I'd
But-
like to respond to that one about,
Sure.
that I'm somewhat familiar, the Business Improvement District, because that really isn't particularly germane to consolidation
Right.
or not. And that was being considered before. I know the mayor called some people together to discuss whether, before all this, to see whether that'd be a viable thing. I was at that meeting, and we talked to people at NICOM about that, because that's been an issue no matter whether it's consolidation or not. Are there certain people that are causing a lot of police use, and not, the rest of the people in the village are our constituents too, and if they're paying higher taxes because of these uses, then maybe there's some way to solve it. And it's not only, Business Improvement District is a big topic, it's not only about how do we pay for the police, it's a whole list of things that you can do to improve but that whole thing has been discussed for a long time, and it's not really tied to consolidation.
Right, it's a
Whether they do or do
recommendation
not do
for the future.
consolidation, it's something that should be considered because it's a problem. And there's Business Improvement District and another potential avenue we can go where just the businesses say open after a certain hour, after midnight or whatever, can be taxed and so forth. So that's a whole independent discussion.
Right.
And people who are not business owners would like us as their constituents, whether the town's involved or not, to look at that because they think it's affecting their taxes. So that's kind of an independent issue, but maybe if there's a consolidation, that's a time when we can address it and look at that as well, but it is an independent issue.
Okay, well, it was raised at a joint meeting in the context of
I
consolidation.
understand, I just wanted to
But-
Thank you,
clarify that.
appreciate that.
But to finish your third question, and that is Kevin Barry's statement, I think there is a misunderstanding by some town board members about what an A fund is and what a B fund is in the town form of government. And if I threaten you with something and you already pay a quarter of that budget, you're gonna look and say, You don't understand how it's financed.
No.
Okay?
I appreciate the comment back and forth. I didn't mean to be up here this long.
Yes, you
but
did, but
That's
that's
fine.
okay. We love you anyway.
That's fine. That's what it is.
I appreciate your time and your effort.
I will tell you, the artist's name is R-A-I-V-O, last name P-U-U-S-E-N-P.
Oh, but he was never supervisor.
Rosen,
Huh?
mayor.
He was never mayor. As far as I can remember.
According to a place in Ireland that's recently had his display, they're crediting him
He
with
did
being
do it.
mayor.
He did do a piece though. That is true.
I had a date with my wife at 9 o'clock. I plan on staying through an hour of the meeting, but,
Well, you said it
Forrest,
just
will you
wasn't
call
policy.
Lisa and tell her he's the troublemaker?
but I'm coming home with a house in the pool.
Motion to end public comment?
Jason has returned. We're
Are you
done.
moving?
The public comment.
comment.
Thank you for exiting.
Yeah, good.
That took care of it.
I'm sorry, there's one change to the consent, I'll move, the consent agenda absent items 4, 5, and 6.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Alright, 4, just, obviously we don't need to do that right now.
You wanna do 5 and 6 right now?
Well, let's just go down the list.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries, we weren't to anything useful yet. I guess they're short ones, aren't they? Alright, number 5, Brian, you wanna, what is it we need to change from the,
Okay, so
Proposal.
not much really. I just wanted to know if there was anything that you guys thought you would want me and the other members of the committee to look into in addition to the things that I gave you. I mean, mine was very vague, and I'm sure I'm gonna head into stuff a little bit deeper. But
yeah, it looks fine to me.
It looks like a good overview, but
Yeah.
the only thing I want to know is are you recommending for the committee?
Okay, so the following members: Nathan Krantz, his last name spelled Krantz. Corey, last name Crowther, Crowther,
Mhm.
and John, John. Seven, but it's spelled Svein.
Now, are there gonna,
Sve.
oh, SV. Now, are there gonna be, you're gonna be the village person,
Yeah.
but who's gonna be the town person?
I don't know if we have a full town person. Jeff said he would help me get information together, but I don't know if they've committed to really bringing anyone fully onto the
So
committee.
this is basically
so it's gonna be
a
me.
village
It's gonna be
committee.
a village committee, and I'm gonna examine what they
No,
have,
just-
and
Find out what's best for us, and probably the town just follow our lead.
that's kind of
That's why I wanted to
yeah.
make sure it's a village
I mean, and
committee.
technically you don't need approval for an ad hoc committee, but it's, I mean, it doesn't matter one or the other.
yeah.
But the members, you wanna
Well,
recommend?
isn't that the purpose of ad hoc? Temporary,
But I
informal,
think
like,
he ought to be appointed chair officially.
I mean, I don't if it.
if you want the motion, great.
I don't care. I
But
mean,
think about this, you have the breakfast, Tuesday breakfast, right? You came up with the parking policy, you didn't set up the committee and appoint Julie and Amy and all that, right?
No,
That's
we just
ad hoc.
okay.
You just get together
But
and
I
do
wanna
what you
make
want.
sure it
Well,
gets done.
there's a difference if this is something the village board wants set up to act, not to make a
Mhm.
policy,
Yeah.
but to do work in its behalf.
Right.
I think you
I'm
want to
fine
at
with
least approve it. I assume these other gentlemen, have experience in this, that's why you're
Both-
suggesting them.
Two of the gentlemen are computer science graduates. One of Mount St. Mary, one of SUNY New Paltz, and the third gentleman is an IT. He's
So
studying
whatever,
information
you know, I
technology.
mean, I just wanna get it
Alright,
done.
I'll move we approve it with the membership.
Okay, second,
All in favor?
Well,
Aye.
Aye.
okay.
We're good.
Great, thanks.
Alright.
okay.
Number 6, I'll do this. A few years ago, New Paltz resident named Jason Kozatek died. Some of the residents of the community would like to set up a memorial bench near the community gardens, and would like our permission since it's village property.
I will move it with thanks to Rebecca for
And I'll second that.
organizing that.
Just the only question in the future then is this donated to the village and the village maintains it, or do people who are doing it maintain it?
It's a bench, it'll last for a while.
Okay.
But it's J-Bone, so there'll be a lot of people there. to
They're,
take care of
they're
it.
asking just for permission to install.
Yeah,
They're not running it through trust and agencies or anything.
yeah. And
Right.
just for anyone who didn't know J-Bone, it was one of my favorite memories of him is he got all the street kids organized. He'd wake them up and get them all out at 8 a.m. on a Saturday morning without telling anyone, and take brooms and sweep all of Main Street and go down and scrub the graffiti off the trees by the rail trail. So he would do some quiet community organizing like that every few years. So he
Well, I
was a
think
good
it's
guy.
very thoughtful of Rebecca and whoever
Yeah.
is doing that.
So it's been moved and seconded. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Alright.
Aye. Thank you. I would like to move to accept with regrets the resignation of Building Inspector Kathy Monis, who's moving on to greener pastures.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And we're getting a list already that's in process, so we'll have that for our next meeting.
Question on that.
Yeah.
We can go outside of the list. It could be somebody who's elsewhere.
Likely we're going to be able to. By law, you have to hire from the list the top 3 names, but if I think 2 out of the 3 turn it down or have moved,
No.
you can then go lower or outside the list.
No, my
Or you can hire provisionally, provided they then pass the test and score in the top 3.
Okay,
So
but
those are the 2 routes we have.
is there a third route, and that is there is a known quantity already employed by another village or town?
They have to be on the list for Ulster County in
But
the
they
top 3.
obviously were on the list and still are, but they're not.
If they're not in the top 3, then if they're on the list and say they're at number 7 on the list, right? 2 of the top 3 have to say no, and probably they will, because if you're in the top 3, you likely already have a job somewhere. At least that's been my experience with building inspectors. So likely, we'll be able to hire lower on the list or off the list. But if 2 of the top 3 are also, I can't remember the exact detail. I'll get the data for you. But there's some kind of weird thing where you have to hire one of the top scorers in the test.
Right. But they
Under
might
certain
be
conditions.
employed elsewhere.
And if that's the case, if enough of those top people are employed elsewhere, we can hire whoever we want, and then they later have to score in the top 3 on the test.
But I guess
I'll send everyone the link so you can read the civil service thing.
This is
But
based
my
solely on
I don't
test
wanna
scores,
just,
that's it?
That's the civil
Yeah.
service. It's a list. Yeah. It's
I-
how we hire DPW workers, building inspectors, account clerks,
Planners. too,
and
I mean-
yeah, planners. We just don't have a test in Ulster County. Yeah.
okay, I guess I'm not making my,
Yeah. What am I misunderstanding?
or maybe I'm misunderstanding. We advertise for a building inspector.
Not yet,
Why not?
because we already know the top 3 candidates. We must interview the top 3 people who come in, who want to be interviewed. You
Okay.
have to.
All right, let me pose and,
Yeah.
and then you tell
If
me
they
where I'm
if they
wrong.
say no or something goes wrong, then we can advertise. But our first stop has got to be the list.
Why can't we advertise and hope that somebody who's really good and got the job they're currently in because they were at the top of the list?
If they're at the top of the list, we'll be calling them anyway.
You're saying if once you get a job, you're still
still on the list.
and
You're
stay
still on
lower?
the list. Oh,
Yes.
that's what I didn't
Yes, I'm
understand.
sorry, yeah, no.
Okay.
If so say all right. So I don't know, Nick Cuddington in the DPW. If he scores number 1, even though he works here, he's still number 1 on the list.
Okay, that's what I
As long
didn't.
as he's taken
I
him in a certain
wasn't
number of
clear.
years. Yeah.
He remains on the list as number
Which is
1.
right. Which is why it's so often that the top 3 say no, because you're calling people who are already happily employed somewhere
Okay.
and they're looking for a new job.
Are you going to recommend any differential in salary?
No, I don't
A
believe so.
range?
No.
Do you have to, when you interview those people, should they wanna be interviewed, do you have to have, at that point, know what job you're offering them and the salary and so forth, or do you interview
Well,
them first
personnel
and then
can
see if
discuss
you're gonna
that.
make an offer? I mean, do
The-
they have to know what it is when you're offering?
They already
them?
know what it is because it's a building inspector 1. You just that's what it is. The job is the salary is dependent. It's
But
up to us.
That's what I'm saying,
Yeah.
do they have to know before you interview them, or when you interview them, what
Not by law.
salary you're gonna do, or you just interview them and later you may make an offer, you may not, is that?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing in the law that says you need to say ahead of
Okay.
time. It's just in that sense, it's the same as any other hire. You talk salary later.
Because we wouldn't necessarily hire that person at the same rate Kathy was when she left, because Kathy was here for
It
a while.
depends on
and
the
she's-
experience levels and what we're
Well,
looking
that
at,
too, sure. Kathy's gotten
But
raised.
we'll, I'll send people I'll
Yeah.
send people a little primer on it. I
Is
have
the,
a little
is
thing.
the
Yeah.
personnel committee going to do the interviewing with Kirk?
We haven't even got that far.
Okay,
Yeah, we don't
Right.
even know the names. Katie got is contact the county today.
okay, so
But
you'll
yeah, but
tell
we'll
us
be
what
yeah,
we're
it's not that urgent. In the next 2 weeks, I'll have by the end of the week, hopefully I'll have better information. Yeah, well, by the
Consent decree?
we already did.
Oh, I thought we just took some out, but.
What?
took them
Katie,
out.
did we vote on the consent agenda?
No.
Yes,
No, we didn't, it was been moved and seconded.
Oh,
though.
actually, I'm
Yes,
sorry,
we
you
did.
did.
You did,
You
yeah.
moved it because we removed 4, 5, and 6.
Okay,
You
Alright.
moved it, Sally seconded it, 4 ayes.
okay, good.
Alright, and I'll move to approve the street closure for Huguenot Street, for the Easter egg hunt.
is that for the Easter egg hunt?
Mhm. Yeah,
Okay.
is there a second?
Second?
Any discussion?
I don't like eggs.
Well, you don't really eat the ones you find in the street.
Even if they're
Oh.
colored and
That's
pretty?
really, don't eat the eggs you find in the street from now on, that's been your problem.
That's oh wow.
Alright, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I
Alright, let's go
What-
down the
that-
list.
that-
What?
So I'm going to abstain, it's
Oh,
already
you're
passed because
board
I'm
of-
a member of the
yeah.
board of Historic Huguenot Street.
Okay. And, alright, so let's go down the list. Kurt, off-street parking, you wanna handle, well, what do we got for Kurt? So it's 1, 2, 3,
the whole
4,
agenda.
5, yeah, all of them are you,
Yes.
actually, Kurt.
Except
yeah.
mine.
Except you, yeah. All of the agenda items are yours.
Okay.
Mike, have you been getting the packets of the meetings?
Yeah.
Okay,
Or has Aaron been getting them and sharing? Oh.
I think you got both of those.
I know, right?
Jeremiah, Mike, and
Well,
Aaron.
Rubik's chair.
Mike and Aaron, yeah, the other, yeah, right. Alright, so Kurt, whenever you're ready, Kurt. I mean, is this,
Okay.
I'm just wondering, because none of these are grouped, are they?
No, they're different.
Well, the
Not to
B
my
three and the
knowledge.
complete street, no, whatever, just go through the list, let's just, yeah.
Okay. First one, of course, is developed in conjunction with the planning board, recommendations regarding off-street parking and loading standards.
Now, you want to amend the current law, but use the term guidelines instead of standards?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, actually, and again, this was developed, the planning board had developed sentiments about the existing parking regulations. And then after several meetings of discussion and a couple of drafts, they approved something to be referred and recommended to the village board for your consideration. And I just want to open these documents so I can answer specific questions about them.
I only have one.
Okay, yes, actually, it may just, let's see, it may just be one indeed.
Kurt, would you like to borrow my copy? Is that easier?
That'd be great. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Appreciate that.
I like it that we have provisions for stadium capacity. One space for each 6 seats of auditorium or stadium capacity.
That's very true.
Does the SUNY facility count as a stadium?
SUNY facility?
Look at the athletic thing for.
If it's off campus.
Here are all the legislative ones.
Thank you very much for returning this.
My pleasure.
Would we, I guess we need the village attorney to put this into the local law format. Or probably you can just do that, cutting and pasting, right?
It is.
I can, I
And
mean,
then just the formal, like, local
Oh.
law number X of 2013, that kind of thing.
Right.
To
Two
file
que-
it.
I have 2 questions, based on last night's conversation and meeting. Have we gotten clarity on parking requirements in the Gateway District?
Yes, well, I believe I know what they are. It hasn't changed from last night. In other words, it may seem contradictory, but for the moment, until we alter the language, what we have is the gateway allowing, in some situations, 0 lot line setbacks on each and every lot line. And that, of course, means that, well, unless you're building parking on top of the structure or something of that nature, that it would seem to leave no space for parking. Of course, that's true. However, our current schedule of required off-street parking does not exempt any district, gateway or not, 0 lot line or not.
I think we really need to clarify that in the Gateway. I think this is part of the confusion of that whole Gateway, because you're allowed to develop to the full extent of the property
Right.
without parking.
Well, I guess I don't see that necessarily as a problem. As Kurt mentioned, there's always the option of parking on top. Or no, or
Ah.
or underneath. If you have this,
That wasn't
Yeah.
even
no.
proposed.
But think about it this way: if you've got a ground floor and you've got 100% lot coverage, have the ground floor be the parking, and the 2 to 4 stories above it be the thing.
Then you
But
include
that's also a business decision to choose between 100% lot coverage and leaving some for parking.
well, anyway,
Anyway,
it's
we-
a problem.
Yeah.
But the other thing that you don't have in the list is a movie theater.
Let's see, I think we have,
Cultural, you have cultural education defined as museums.
I could have sworn. Because we have it's one parking space for every 6 seats in a proposed theater.
In a cultural facility.
Okay,
One space for each 800 feet of gross floor area.
well, that's very different than what we've been utilizing. So one way or another, we came upon one space for each 6 seats. Okay, places of public assembly, including assembly halls, auditoriums, churches, theaters, and concert halls.
I think you better add movies in there,
Theaters.
It's not a theater.
cause someone could say,
Well, actually, I'm sorry. Theater. It's in. You mean Ed separated from those?
a theater is generally a live performing place. I would add the word cinema.
Oh, okay. Okay.
That's my only thought.
Okay. Now, of course, what's proposed here is a major departure from how we currently utilize the standards, and you've heard me say this before, that when cars were truly king, and we know that not only aren't they going to continue to be king forever, but certainly not within the village of New Paltz. So this is providing a lot of discretion to the planning board, and it's going to be up to the planning board to adopt written findings in each case. So there's a larger burden on us. However, I think I can assist the planning board, perhaps along with our legal counsel.
I think it's an excellent recommendation, and I love your write-up.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll move it.
Actually,
Get for
hold on
it
one
here.
second.
It has to have a hearing, right?
Oh, of course, yeah. I'll
You know what
second
I'm wondering?
for discussion.
Actually, is there? Let me just ask this because it might shuffle things ahead. Did anyone have any concerns or questions about the graffiti or the meter/parking spot removal? Because if not, if we don't need to talk about it, I'd rather just move to set a public hearing for each on March 27th, about 10 minutes apart.
I just had one minor question on the graffiti part.
I have a question.
So if we need to talk about this, that's fine. We can talk about it. It just seemed like it might be no-brainers for us at this
No,
point.
I just wanna
Do
know
you think
if
that this
the
parking
inside
stuff is going to
Well, that's the
create a
table prices.
longer attorney/planning board timeframe and exacerbate the fees that are currently happening?
A good question. You mean related to the discussion that preceded this?
Yeah.
I don't think so, because actually the benefits to, well, first of all, the benefits to recognizing the type of community we are in our physical layout is of great value to our applicants. In other words, Brian was asking would the need for findings elongate the process and exacerbate costs and so forth? Well, hopefully we do want to address what we believe are real issues in the discussion during public comment that preceded this, and at the same time, the value to applicants in not having to do, well, quite frankly, either go to the ZBA or somehow find off-street parking when the parcel simply may not have it, and no other adjacent parcels may, of course, be available for purchase or lease. I think in the end, even applicants would agree that would be helpful. So there's a great value in
Yeah.
that.
And I mean, the other thing I could think is, I guess, 215, right? Is that the complex up there?
Yes.
The situation there, I think when my understanding of the planning board was some of those places were thought to say, okay, well, you can park on the street over, or you can park on the other street, on streets adjacent to it, right? Is my
You mean
understanding?
like some of the street, there's no parking on Main there, but you're saying they could walk from one of the cross streets or something?
Right, and those were considered in when like the yoga place opened up as like part of the seating. Because there's only limited
Actually,
spacing in the back.
That's true, there's very limited spacing, as you mentioned. Now,
Right.
I wasn't aware that the decisions that preceded me on, let's say, the yoga studio, which is gonna have some very heavy peak periods and the other uses that are shared there, I didn't know that they actually relied upon, that they actually cited the residential street, legitimate legal parking.
Right.
I didn't realize, and they may have.
I mean, that may be hearsay, but my thought is that
That's
in a situation like that, the people who are coming in, the applicants, may get themselves into a situation where there may not be enough parking, and they don't necessarily understand what that is. Now, if we say, well, we're a walkable community and we want you to be able to succeed there, so you'll be fine, don't worry about the parking, and then it turns out that it's not enough for their, I mean, like, do you think that could cause issues, or it's just better to?
I think that's a real issue,
Right.
and I'll say what it is if let's say you take sort of what we might consider uptown, moving towards the part of Main Street that is within the town. As we move away from downtown, what we have, of course, are a couple of places where suburban parking standards have been applied, and there isn't any parking on Main Street, or even necessarily a very nearby cross street. In other words, Russo's Deli opened up, and as I've been there, seems to be doing pretty good business, even though, of course, there's no on-site parking. Now, it happens to be at an intersection where you can park close by on Main or on a cross street,
Sure.
probably Oakwood.
Yeah.
And but as you move up, namely there's a deli and a laundromat across the street from Prospect. There's a small parking lot that can simply be full, and at that point, you must exit the parking lot. You're not going to find legal parking on Main Street at that point. So that's, in other words, it's this area where it becomes vague whether it's a suburban area or sort of or New Paltz. And another example is 215 Main is a perfect example of that. By the way, on the good side, 184, the property that we spoke of earlier tonight, has great parking for the square footage that two-story building has. So that problem was not presented there, but there were other properties, and 215 might be one of the best examples of it.
Is that Village?
Yeah, that's at the eastern extent of the Village on Main Street. Yeah. And it's of course it was only approved a few years ago, so it's not something that we're dealing with like 184 Main Street, where we're dealing with conditions that when the site was developed as Jack in the Box over 40 years ago. Those are real issues. I'd like to think that there might be room within the right of way to create some additional parking on Main Street.
Well, the parking plan, the immediate part of the parking plan, which we're gonna deal with as soon as we get done there are proposals to have meters up there. You've read the
That'd be
plan.
great, and I think that would
Yeah,
really.
but we're not there yet.
Right, agreed.
Mhm.
Are there any other questions? Let's group these three together because they're all simple: graffiti, parking guidelines, and meter and parking spot removal. Any questions about those? Stuart, you want graffiti?
On graffiti, the last time this came up, citizens were upset about it, which they should be, and they had a very strict policy about the business owners having to take care of it right away, even though they may have had nothing to do with putting it there, and it's defacing their property and they're gonna have to fix it, which there's no one else that's gonna come fix it, so that's okay. But it was a very strict policy about how you did it and what it cost, and it was kind of gave them almost like a double jeopardy thing for the business owner, so it's the enforcement and the fines and all of that that I'm concerned about now. If someone's totally uncooperative, then, and they don't do what they're duty to do after a long period of time, and having to spend a lot of enforcement people's time to do it, then I can see a heavier fine and so forth, but how will this be taken care of?
Sure.
Because I know it'll say, it's an enforcement thing, but practically speaking, how difficult will it be to deal with this? plus I know there's a separate issue that if you have tags put on your property, the gang tags, the police department wanna know that before you do anything, come take a photo and all of that business, so this gets the property owner into
Okay,
a
well,
problem
actually,
here, so just, what's the practical way of how this will be administered, that's my concern, it has to be done, but how is it gonna be?
two important questions you mentioned. The first is that this would be placed into our local property maintenance code, such that it would be with other things that are already, in other words, the first thing would be a notice to remedy. So there wouldn't be this immediate threat of a fine, and as well, there should not be. So, and a reasonable amount of time in the same way that other violations in the same category would be, there would be some reasonable amount of time to removal. Like you said, it's really to provide for its removal within a reasonable amount of time, and so it doesn't become semi-permanent or just there. So it would be, there would not be any fines or enforcement proceedings. Immediately there would be a notice to remedy and some reasonable frame of time to correct those in the same way that other ones in that category.
So this, when we do get a policy about that, that could be, sent out in a short paragraph with the, water bills, the way we just did about the shade trees and clipping the trees and all that. We could get the word out there so that people wouldn't be shocked to find out there's this policy.
It would be very helpful to all, including my own office, as well as, most importantly, the owners and operators of properties and businesses. Yes, and that would help a great deal. As far as the second question, the building inspector had informed me of this, I guess a request, but I never could find anything in writing, any correspondence between the village board. It was just sort of known, and I have no idea how this process came into being. However, the process, as I understood it, is not being, there was no, I'm not aware of any notice to a property owner saying, okay, we've examined the potential gang-related tagging that appears on your property somewhere. It was that, once I couldn't find anything in writing, I said, well, this isn't working, the graffiti is just accumulating. And in fact, of course, it goes, in the end, it had the opposite effect. In other words, it was almost protecting the graffiti. The effect, the unintended effect was that the graffiti would stay up and that you couldn't remove it, and that some owners felt, well, now I have code enforcement and the police department asking something of me. But that system, and I couldn't find anything in writing.
There isn't.
I think it's something that'll have to be clarified with the police chief as to what's important, and that'll be part of the solution here, but we shouldn't come up with a solution until we have the input from what's important from the police chief.
I'm gonna disagree.
Oh, okay.
Because when we talked about this ages ago, about the whole problem with graffiti, we were told by the police that it was state law and we didn't have to worry about it, remember?
No,
Okay,
that was a
you
long
were.
time ago.
And that's why it
We didn't
never,
have to worry about what?
Vicky Danskin had a proposal before the prior board about graffiti.
Right.
When we came into office very early on, we had a discussion and inquired, and I wasn't satisfied with the answer, and I think your solution is the solution, because there is nothing that ever was codified in the village to address this.
Or even a formal agreement
Right.
in any way. So then,
I mean, I'm not interested so much in, if there's no ordinance or something that says we have to do it, then we can ignore it. I'm more interested if the police think it's really important that we know about the tagging, that's somehow part of the process. And maybe the part of the process is when the code enforcement officer sends the notice, if it's something of that nature, that a copy goes to the police chief. If they wanna come look at it, they can, you know.
yes, actually, in thinking about it, because again, this was difficult to deal with. I couldn't find anything on it, but I knew it existed, and I wouldn't want to interfere with the pursuit of gang-related tagging and the investigation of it. So what I came up with along the lines of what you suggested, Stuart, in my case was that when the code enforcement officer goes out to note it or document it, that they take all the photographs possible
Mhm.
to provide to the police, and I would hope that that would be satisfactory.
Sure, as long as the police get them, and if they wanna act on it, they can act.
Well, the reverse happened, you remember? Right after you came and the people down on Main Street wanted to paint the graffiti off the back of their building, and the police told Kathy they couldn't because they needed it for evidence.
Well, I shouldn't say that I know anything about
Okay.
about.
We oughta make sure we know what their position is, even if ultimately we don't agree with it, but we ought to at least know what the police's
I don't
position is to know whether we're making an intelligent decision.
I don't think I don't think that the position has altered, and I don't think it's been altered. I believe that the building inspector made a call to help me understand and for she to understand. I don't believe that there ever was a substantive conversation after she had reached out to them about it, but I have to tell you, the observation of a non-law enforcement officer is that it's protecting the graffiti up there, and if it is gang-related tagging and refers to territories and so forth and identification, it's providing aid and comfort.
I mean, I don't know if it's true, but if it is an evidence question, then probably it won't serve as evidence that somebody takes a photograph and sends it to the police.
Well, I don't
I
think
don't know
it's,
if that would hold up
I don't
if it
think
really
it's-
was used
Alright,
as evidence.
I'm at a loss then.
I don't know,
But
but I
I'm
think
at,
we
I'm
should
at a
find
loss
out.
because our building inspector reached out because she had contacts, namely with the chief in the department, and was not able to have a conversation that provided that updated the policy or discussed it, or how come we haven't received word that it's okay to for an owner on their own to remove it, or for the village to seek it, even though we don't have a local law requiring its removal. So as I saw it start to accumulate in the brief time that I resided and lived here, I became more and more concerned, and one day I just embarked on writing this. But we did reach out to the police department.
If the proposed, when there's agreement and there's a proposed local law or something to do this, then maybe that we should specifically send it to the police department. Do you have any comments or not before we vote on it?
And if we receive nothing in return, we can move
And
forward.
that's your answer, is
Okay.
proving, assuming you prove that they got it.
So you'd like to
Wow.
table this until we hear from the police?
Well, you're going to, have to, I mean, this is not, we just pass it, it's over, right? It doesn't,
No, we
no
have a
hearing
hearing.
and all our business.
But would you like to hold off on setting a public hearing until we hear back from the police? I'm not
I-
sure how serious, how critical is this, give some advice here.
Well, I think there's still time to act on it if it's that important for the police. If we notify them, we set a public hearing and say, here, police, as we've set the public hearing, here's the proposed law we're gonna do, and we're gonna hear from you. So if you wanna come say anything, you wanna send anything, you do it. And if it's that important, then we can renotice it if we have to, otherwise we can do what we're gonna do.
I do understand. I don't want to give them any ultimatums. I really don't want to
I'm not
interfere.
asking for ultimatum, I'm
Alright.
just saying, here's what we're proposing to do, we think the village board thinks this is the way we're gonna do. Do you have any comments? Because otherwise, we're gonna act on it.
I think we ought to set the hearing tonight on this, and I agree
Well,
with you,
they'll
Stuart,
list it.
that they ought to
Yeah, I
comment
have no
if they have a
problem
comment. But this has been a problem in the village for a very long time, and as to my knowledge, no one has ever been arrested for doing graffiti, and I think this at least will provide.
Yeah, there has been.
Recently,
You have
I
to,
think.
you have to catch them for it.
Recently, there may have been one. I heard informally. I heard that there had been a recent arrest of a very, very prolific tagger in the village, and I don't know. Again, I don't know what the penalties are.
Well, I think that at least we should be asked if it's on public property.
Well,
you know.
this was everywhere. This
Yeah,
particular.
but I think that we ought to be asked and consulted about the punishment, because I think that person should have to clean it up.
That's actually the only punishment I would ask for. I
And that's
wouldn't.
what the judges give. They have people who are caught pay for the cost of removing it. because I've gotten hired to paint over it.
I thought you were gonna
I
say
see.
you got caught.
No, I've been hired as a house painter to fix the
Mike,
paint.
did you hear
I
that?
don't know
He
if-
But
admitted
this
to
is,
it.
Alright, let's-
but this is we're kind of wandering away from what
Okay.
we can actually do at this table. So just one last thing, because we've covered most of it. I think we got people's questions about graffiti removal and the parking guidelines, the meter / parking spot removal.
I still have.
Oh, you have yours.
Yeah, I
Please,
still have
what were yours,
questions.
please?
One, I just think it's unfortunate that we're gonna charge people that we're gonna force people to remove graffiti, and then I can't help but think that the people who are doing the tagging are just gonna show up again to the same spot, see their tag covered, and come back and tag it again.
That's true. However, remember that this was, for example, the New York City subway system had an intense problem with this. Somehow, they fixed it. If they can fix it, how can we not fix it?
Have
Well,
a bigger
because they have-
budget.
Well, I was gonna say
Well, okay, then.
they have a few more cops, and
I'll tell you what. This was I wanted to offer this to you. It didn't take so long to prepare that we couldn't put it off even indefinitely. But I want you to know I do get complaints, and people believe that there's at least some sentiments out there that it's simply code enforcement, which we don't have a law in the books to force its removal.
Sure.
Yeah, sure. It's against. There's a criminal law statute written somewhere to prevent you from doing it. But aside from catching the person and having them make restitution, there's a lot of people who've certainly written to me saying directly to my office saying, do you think that this is part of New Paltz's culture or what makes it cool? Because it isn't, and I happen to agree with them.
No,
That's
I
one of the
do
things
too.
that make us cool, but-
I just don't want
And I
the,
think for the
punishment to be
police
worse
to
than
take
the
it
crime for
seriously,
the
we need
property
this one.
owners. I mean,
Abs-
it's not,
Yes.
they're not the ones that are doing it.
No, they're
gonna-
not.
They're gonna get them in
No.
trouble, so as long as there's enough process there, so,
Okay.
you know,
In the end,
They
if it is seen as oppressive on property owners, then I want you to know it can be withdrawn. I didn't take so long to prepare it that we couldn't hold it
Well,
off.
I'm concerned about public space too, and
Yes.
that's what I wanted to ask. Would it be possible to add sidewalks and governmental signs?
Yes, however, as far as who's required to remove it, that would be us.
That would be
And
us.
the-
That'd
and
be
the
us, and
broker-
I think we should do it.
We
I
don't-
think- you know
we
what, by
don't
the way,
need a
that's-
law.
Huh?
We don't need a law.
Well, you're right. Jason's right.
Because we're the ones who enforce it, it becomes a moot point, because if it's on the books and we don't enforce it, it doesn't happen, so therefore it doesn't require a law.
I
We're
agree.
exempt
I
from all
think-
of our own local laws.
I
right?
think the mayor's correct, and let me just state that the public property, and it appears on a lot of parking meters and quite frankly everywhere. So in our case, if we were to go forward with this and put this requirement onto private property owners and not remove it ourselves and have whether
That's
it be
my
us or other
concern.
agencies, that would be setting a terrible example, and I'd
So
be.
if we don't intend to remove it and impose that removal on ourselves, then we shouldn't have the law at all. I think we should remove it, and I think,
So tonight, would you like, should we set, because what my plan is we've got graffiti removal, parking guidelines, meter / spot removal, and a resolution for that.
Yep.
As well as a resolution from Joe about zoning definitions.
Yep.
And the B3 revision, and I don't know about the B3, we'll see where we get with that. But the first four seem simple enough that we could set a hearing about 5 minutes apart on each of them for the 27th,
I agree.
and then see where with the B3. So, Brian, your questions?
Yeah, well, I just feel like number one, like my question wasn't really answered. I mean, what is the cost of pulling graffiti off? Are we willing to do that for every stop sign continuously as people keep tagging them? It is going to become expensive at some point.
That
Is
we
it-
can't actually.
What?
All
You
the
can't?
cleaners that we've discussed, we've tried to use, to get the stickers and spray paint off, destroys the reflectivity of the sign, which makes them illegal. So we kind of
So we're like replacing stuff.
the state is basically they're too expensive. So the state basically the materials we're required to use for signs like that, the materials prevent us from removing the graffiti stickers. We can't do it without destroying the legality of the
The sign.
sign.
So what do we do? I mean, we're requiring everyone else to remove graffiti from their stuff
We have
except us.
graffiti on other places that,
What about our meters? Are we gonna not
meters
remove?
that can be cleaned.
That can be cleaned up.
Okay, well, I'm saying
The
like
stuff in the parks can be
this
cleaned up.
isn't going to do anything to curtail people from graffitiing things, and it's going to be a cost.
You mean regardless of how, if we're more determined than they are, it doesn't.
Like if we keep cleaning and they keep tagging,
Well,
I mean,
It's because
That's-
the building inspector's not gonna be walking the village at 2 in the morning, is why it's not gonna stop.
a fair point. Fair point.
And neither is the property owner.
I suppose if
It's
the
a tough-
property
it's a tough
owner
one.
has to do this enough times, maybe they'll
The other thing is,
figure out how to
look,
fix the place. You know?
again, you, here's,
Right, I agree.
okay, I mean, there even could be some reward for tips to the police on this. Why not? A minor, or probably some monetary reward might help the investigation. I don't really, for a second, think about that as ratting. I mean, I'm sorry, but you know
Well,
that's
if
not.
If they only
Depends
would
if
receive
you
that,
have
would only receive that if someone was convicted or whatever.
You're right. If there
Then
were
that
strings
would be
attached,
okay, you know.
but you know
we
what?
don't have to pass the law. We could have the public hearing, see what the public has to say,
Mm-hmm.
and decide then.
I would like to add the penalty clause. I think that's worthwhile.
Finish your cookie before you talk.
I was afraid you would move it too quickly.
okay. So
I hope
and
that
I guess
you
the
did.
other thing is just, you know, back to the parking standards. If we remove the standards, I mean, clearly we already have issues like at 215, and even with the standards there, the issues have come up. Is this going to become more of a problem as we remove the standards, and what kind of what practices are we going to take to assure that people are going to have enough parking for the places that they want to go to?
Right now we're at a major policy juncture. So this was suggested by the planning board and myself.
Yes.
I supported it, but we're at a major policy junction, and what I'm saying is that there are spaces. I've in the short time I've been here, I've walked around on the beautiful weekends last summer and fall, and was still able to find unused on-street parking, and even in the parking lot for this very building, there's over 110 parking spaces. And with the police no longer headquartered here, of course, there's more spaces than ever. But yet people aren't using them. So I would suggest signage to direct them here, and that people, not for a second would they turn around and drive home because of a congested traffic light, or even if they have to park a couple of blocks away where they can't even quite see Main Street. That's my feeling, but we're at a major junction for policy. In other words, it's we could. By the way, 215. That's really unfortunate because it was only a few years ago that project was
Right.
approved, and so it's not something that we all inherited.
What's it, 215?
Oh, that's the
That's Sal's place?
yes.
It's
Yeah.
Italian architecture.
Yes. Yeah, so there, I mean that's really a shame because we reviewed that in the recent past, and yet somehow didn't manage to provide enough parking, and nor did the residents there. Whether or not they have cars, I suppose they might one day own a car, but there's no parking for residents at any mixed-use project. There should be parking for residents, and by the way, what I'm proposing exempts residential uses entirely. You still must conform with the regulation. Actually, I'm actually proposing in this very proposal to completely loosen the non-residential requirements and increase by one space the parking requirements, because I mean I've seen enough front lawns turned one way or another, turned into parking lots. They may not be paved or striped, but they've been turned into parking lots. Our community was not built with households having that many vehicles in mind.
Which is why a law was passed years ago to outlaw parking. I think it was asphalt. You can't park in the yard, which then
You're right.
of course causes problems in the winter because we tell people you can't get in the street either. So it's we've got a
the
couple of
winters-
catch-22s that we hire you
Yes. Well, exactly. Now the winter stuff is really rough. The other stuff I think can be addressed.
Has the EDA and chamber and other entities, have you got input from them on that? Because I remember when we were gonna do a law in dealing with parking on Front Street, and we had several of the business owners come and they were quite upset if we can't park there, and it's gonna ruin their business and things. Have you had input? from
That's
them?
on street, right? Well, I'm a
yeah.
big advocate of on-street parking.
Yeah, so, I mean, in other words,
I have not.
have we had preliminary talks with the business community, like
Just the planning board, and I think that the board and I would endorse anything that you'd ask of us before, implementing this or adopting it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not opposed to having it, putting it up for public hearing, but I think we have to go out of our way to the constituencies that are really affected by it, make sure they're aware of it. I mean, obviously they see it in the paper and all that, but
Yes,
we don't wanna have a big backlash because they didn't know about it. We might decide to do the same thing anyway, but at least they should have the opportunity.
Maybe we can include advertising on the Facebook too. Just to,
Happy to post anything.
Alright,
I
if
would
there's any
like
other
to-
questions,
That we,
let me, because I think I got a phrase right, or very,
Okay.
very simple.
we have a motion on the table, right?
Well, actually, what was said was, Sally, commented how excellent, Kurt's recommendation was. She said, I'll move it, you seconded it, but there wasn't an actual what we were moving. But before we continue on
Take
that
that
vein, I can take that as a.
you may
Brian.
remove it, cause he's got a better
Okay,
recommendation.
before we go forward for 1 second, the court clerks, requested that I convey to the board how important it is in the proposed parking plan that the parking spaces reserved for them are the ones right outside their door. They work later in the evening. Some of the people who are in the court later in the evening don't always, leave as promptly as one would hope, and for their safety, they're truly concerned for their safety and request that their parking spaces be right outside the door for the court clerk's office.
Our parking plan doesn't affect them at all, that is, the first 1, 2, 3, I think it's the first 15 on that side belong to the town.
They just wanted to make sure that they were very concerned about.
It's town
That's
property.
I'm
true.
ready for I'm ready for the mayor's motion when he's
Alright,
ready.
I move to set public hearings on legislative business items 1, 2, 3, and 4 for March 27th, beginning at 7:30 p.m. and spaced 5 minutes apart.
Are we voting? We're voting on them all together.
Might as well.
'Cause-
I mean, do you wanna,
Oh, I'm gonna vote no on the graffiti.
okay,
Okay.
so noted then, with that, unless there's more complicated votes than that, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And then 1 no on the graffiti alone, is that the only one?
Yeah. What other ones? 1, 2, 3, and 4. You
1,
said?
2, 3, and 4.
Well, the resolution we have to
We
do.
don't, well,
That's
she
not
can
a
just-
hearing.
She can mark them, we are setting a public hearing on all of them.
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
we don't have
local
to
law.
vote on
And I
this.
thought we were.
On which one?
This, on the resolution for the parking.
Oh, the DOT, I'm sorry, I thought that was
Yeah.
a local law that we were
That
doing
we
that.
don't need.
I apologize.
That, the local law's in the parking, in here.
So,
And I just wanted everybody to make sure that they got my email this afternoon, that all of the local parking plans that we have discussed previously, we agreed that the single side parking on certain streets is removed. It is for a future discussion, a full discussion by this board. We have had a lot of public input. That is not one of the items B. So that
okay,
needs
so
to be
do,
removed.
I'm sorry, remove item 4 then.
Yeah.
So 1, 2, and 3, all in favor with the one exception?
I-
We vote it. So I'll move both resolutions to have them in minutes separately. One regarding zoning definitions, the other regarding meters and parking spots.
Now, the resolution on zoning definitions is setting the hearing
For
for the
March
27th.
27th, yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't have Brian's vote for the other.
And
So
this-
no for if I mean it really
Sorry,
shouldn't
this
be
is, sorry,
one
this,
motion.
let me just go through them one at a time. This is getting way
Please.
too confusing.
Thank you.
It should have been very simple. So that's why I asked if there were any more comments. I move that we set a public hearing on item number 1 for March 27th at 7:30.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I move that we set a public hearing March 27th, 7:35 for item number 2. Is there a
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Nay.
The same motion for item number 3 at
Second,
7:40 p.m.
second,
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I move we adopt item number 4, the resolution.
no, that is,
Do you not want to adopt that resolution?
I do, but we have to talk, that's different than that.
It doesn't matter if it's different. I'm
We
asking
don't
if
have
you
to
want to
have a
pass
hearing,
it.
we don't have to have a
I
hearing.
didn't say, the motion wasn't for a hearing. The
Oh.
motion was to pass the resolution.
Yes, but I would like to add
So would you like to
Brian's,
second it?
I'll second it.
Okay, and
And
what's the
I'd like-
amendment?
I'd like to add Brian's parking spaces, since Katie said we have to put our requests in to DOT
So you just,
as a formal thing.
what do you wanna change? That's all
Just,
I'm
I
asking.
wanna add,
Okay,
You just
What-
gotta add the numbers here.
that's all, just tell me what we need to add,
How
so we
many?
can move on.
It was one parking space on either side of.
All four corners, right? So
Yeah, it was the four corners of either street.
Four parking spaces
4 parking spaces.
on the on the north and south.
Yep.
Right?
See, that's not worded properly. He didn't word that right.
Do you want me to lift it from
At the
motion?
intersection.
Did I say? The board is removing 4 parking spaces on Main Street on the north and south intersections of Grove.
Of Oakwood and Grove respectively. That's right,
Because it would be one.
in each corner.
It would be one parking space on the north and one parking space on the south. Does that spell it out properly
I
as
think
4
so.
parking spaces? I don't
No,
know.
if
I
you
think-
want do you wanna? I mean, these things should be written ahead of time.
Okay,
Well,
mine
well,
is
uh,
written ahead of time, we just added Brian's cut, so do the first paragraph.
What do you do the first paragraph?
First paragraph, you know, the
I'm not
3.
gonna read it. What are you telling me?
No. The resolution is whereas the Village of New Paltz Board of Trustees, the board is desirous after due consideration
Wait,
of
I'm sorry.
study.
Wait, stop. Brian,
How about let me just adjust
we'll do
this.
later. Yeah, figure it out, and we'll
And-
come back. to
and we'll
this.
come back to
All right,
it.
That's
Okay.
good. Fine, thank you. Just want
Yeah.
to move this over.
Yep.
All right. So the last 2 items occurred again. Complete streets in B3. I don't know. I'll leave it to you if you want to put them together or separate or whatnot.
Well, actually, I'd like to take up just complete streets and then get on to the
And we
next
don't have to read
subject.
the whole thing. Just give us
Right.
the gist for the
Got it.
papers.
Okay, complete streets is a term associated with the coalition, the National Coalition for Complete Streets. It's of course, a nonprofit organization and associated with, I think, a group called Smart Growth America. Across the country, there are something in the order of 250 communities or counties or other governmental subdivisions that have passed what are known as complete streets policy resolutions. And I believe they stand for everything that we do in terms of use of our streets, is not just for vehicles, but for all modes of transportation, as well as for people of all physical abilities. So what you have here is it's something that both private developers, our applicants, our village, and other New York State DOT, Ulster County, by the way, has adopted their own policy resolution for this, countywide, and they encourage it, and it should, I believe it's consistent with what our objectives are, and as well as helping us in terms of applying for certain grants, like sidewalks and bicycle lanes and other things. That's the nature of it. And it requires other agencies to acknowledge that we've adopted this. I mean, as an example, some very informative signs were put up by UCTC after they contacted myself and DPW. So they had new signs up that actually have bus schedules. At the same time, all of the signs they had previously put up, noting that it was a county bus stop, are still there. I don't know whether there's some sort of pre-existing agreement that they would put these signs up years ago and it would be our responsibility to maintain or take them down. But they came, put up the new signs as they had told us, and left the old ones. So now we have, it's just sign clutter, and of course that's the last thing in the world we need.
I think they should have taken down.
I would imagine so. I just don't want to say so if there's
But you
some.
might ask Blue if he needs some extra poles, because I know we were running out.
Well,
There probably wasn't any agreement at all, because for many of those signs, they just came up without asking the property owners to just stuck them on their property.
okay. I mean, hopefully they have their own advice about how to do this legally. No? Okay.
I don't know. Big brother, but-
Well, we can figure it out.
I'm gonna
We're not
move-
gonna figure it out right now.
I'm gonna move the resolution, but I'm going to move it amended because item number 4 on the last page requires a change in village law.
Well, that doesn't. This is. A lot of this requires.
Oh,
village law.
that's true. Now, again, this is
Yeah,
a,
this is really specific.
You're right, absolutely, item
Yeah.
number 4 does.
So we should
Taking
remove
forward.
it?
That's the type of thing, by the way, that you shouldn't accept from me at face value. It should be my suggestion, our discussion, and your determination as to whether,
Well, that's I read the whole thing, and that's
Okay.
the one I know.
Okay.
and there
I
are
think we
others
should
that,
leave.
there are others that you're getting part of my thinking in there. I believe it's consistent with that.
I didn't see.
I do.
I
I'll
read-
second it, if we do it second.
Yeah.
I'll
Look-
second, so please.
I have, I read all this too, and a lot of the whereases don't seem to necessarily be relevant to the 8 things that are part of the action of the resolution. It would seem to me, and I'm not saying that I'm necessarily opposed to this, but it seems to me this is the kind of topic that, for which we set this workshop meeting once a month, to really get into this and have yourself and other experts explain this, invite pedestrian committee people's input, because there's a lot of, there's a lot of things here.
There is.
And there's
There is.
cost things here, and, maybe we even need to hear from the engineers. I mean, if you're gonna be changing street shapes and,
Well,
it's
having
probably
committed-
all really good stuff, but, I think you really, and, the elements of complete streets, I mean, is there a manual or something, or
Yes.
you probably know what it is, but I don't know. what
Very
it is.
true. In other words,
And
this
we
should be
really ought to
vetted
have
properly.
a detailed presentation about that to see, and then maybe we'll only like 85% of
Do you
it.
wanna table this to?
Well, I would like to have a workshop whenever you can gather the people who you would need other than yourself to do this, so we can, maybe everybody understands it, I'm the only one
Well-
that doesn't, but
No,
I don't
it's-
think
no,
we have
Stuart.
an in-depth knowledge enough to
There's,
pass this until we really can make an informed decision.
Since when do you raise your hand to
Um,
speak?
I think many of these things we have discussed ad infinitum. Widen sidewalks, we've already talked about. Bicycling routes, we've talked about. Funds to implement improvements that meet performance standards, we've talked about that, and talked about getting grants for sidewalks, and talked about, and extend non-motor vehicle space along the streets. I think what we need are some recommendations to implement this. I don't think we need to discuss it.
A lot of this too is already village policy,
Yeah,
specifically thinking of the transportation study, which has been
Mhm.
obviously sitting on a shelf for most of the past 5 years, but was adopted by the village board.
Mhm.
That doesn't contradict what you're saying either, I mean,
No,
it's just a matter of.
we have talked about some of these things, I don't think we came to decision some of them, because we think it's important, but, if we're gonna go, this is gonna be the policy from now on, anybody comes to New Paltz, this is what we're doing, I think, it needs to be on TV with people presenting, these are the points, write down, and then we'll see what the feedback is, and then you come up with a better product, that's my opinion.
well, I actually I would prefer not to be, to not have this vetted. In other words, I'd like to have it vetted, and,
because
and,
it's very
and again,
important to
this
get
is,
the grants for the things that we need, like sidewalks.
this is not boilerplate language. It actually, I conceived it for the village specifically, while the elements do come from a manual by this group. But that doesn't mean that the public shouldn't have say-so. It shouldn't, you have a lot of my thinking in here, and it may be
It's really
consistent.
wonderful thinking, but, let's develop it a little bit so that we can
Yes.
all believe in it and then enforce it and so forth.
I would, and I don't think we'd be hurt by taking the time to do so in any way.
Brian and Sally, do you wanna pass this tonight, or do you wanna table it?
I'd
until
like to
presentation?
pass it tonight, and I would like to start seeing us moving toward developing implementation plans on things that we have talked and talked about. I think that's more important to me, and it's more important to me to have something in writing that when we go and look for money for sidewalk development, we have this in place to say, see, we are trying, we have adopted, we've resolved to accept this, and now we're looking for funding, and I think that is critical to this village. I mean, if nothing else, sidewalks are critical, and we
I
don't
don't-
have the money to do it.
I don't disagree with you on that point, I just don't think we're at that point yet to make an
I think we
decision.
are.
Well, you two, wait, hold on, you two are pretty much set. Brian, what do you think?
I think they're good suggestions, and I would be interested in, at least setting them as guidelines for what we should be
Passing
doing.
tonight rather than table it for a presentation.
I mean, yeah. I mean, to me, it seems like these are all.
Or let me rephrase that, pass it tonight and then still have a presentation.
Sure.
Because they're not necessarily contradictory.
Yeah.
That I'm not
I-
opposed to.
I'm gonna vote against it for that reason. I'm probably in favor of all this if somebody explains it and then we see what the pros and cons are. You're bringing the speed limit down to 25 miles an hour. Well, that sounds good.
No, that's
On Village-
out.
on Village
I've
streets.
moved it that
That's an
way.
Well,
example
I'm
of
just,
something.
I'm just saying, there's some pretty heavy stuff here. And,
We're not gonna get grants if we don't pass this.
I would just rather discuss in depth, just the way we did it for all of the, code changes we're gonna make. We had 10 sessions on that or something.
I mean,
Because
if
they're important.
if everyone.
Maybe we don't go for all of these, maybe there's a few we don't want in there, but if we pass this, then that's the policy, and then
I mean, that's true.
We can always change it.
Any policy that we do adopt should be considered very thoroughly. I don't particularly see anything on here that I don't agree with, but I mean, if anyone else feels that they would like to see something before we move forward on it, then that's fine with me.
I also don't mind amending our policies regularly as conditions change and new information comes in.
But all of the 8 items that are on this list, with the exception of number 4, which I asked could we remove, are all things that we have discussed extensively as being things that we were interested and wanting. The parking plan that you all accepted from Mariana and me deals with number 1, and you accepted that, and there was a long discussion on that. Number 2 is required by law, and sometimes we don't meet it, and that says we're going to now implement it.
it's about 50 whereases here, I mean, they're all
No,
part of
no.
this.
We also all know where this is going.
Okay, the whereases,
This is gonna pass and we're gonna set up. a
yeah, let's
presentation,
go.
Right?
Well, Kurt, does this bind people to moving forward on it, or is it recommendations as to move forward?
It's policy recommendations move forward. It doesn't place a timeline or even an eventuality, in my view. But you know what? You might want village council's take on that. I mean, I don't want to.
Right.
And
Go.
maybe the planning board, if they're gonna have, if this is our policy and they're gonna have to start enforcing it, maybe they would have input. I mean, it's not that simple, I don't think.
It's not that simple. No, I mean, we would be the first ones expected to adhere to this policy. We would be among the village itself
Right.
would be, and that includes
Mhm.
Our planning board, our zoning board.
Mhm.
That's what I was
It's
gonna
okay,
ask.
it's
Is
not,
that
it doesn't, it's not like a law, it doesn't bind us, it's like, we're not gonna have anything overturned because we didn't do something on this list.
I don't believe so,
It's
and
just, it's just
that's
not
why.
how this thing
It's a
works.
philosophical position
No.
statement, a wish list that I
Yeah, but
would
at the
like to
same-
move my community towards.
But at the same time, I feel like if someone comes before the planning board, I mean, these things are going to be thoroughly considered.
Well, actually, what it does is, in order to conform with the Complete Streets National Coalition, it provides a waiver process, but it's a deliberate process. In other words, take for example a site plan or change of use on Main Street. I included certain recommendations in my last memo on that. They didn't even get discussed because of the nature of the meeting. So we would not have adhered to our own policy, which here says that you must apply for a waiver. So that would take
Right.
time.
Okay. And would that also mean that, okay, so now it's been a crosswalks. I thought I saw something about expanding, widen sidewalks, install streetscape. So now is that going to be on the onus of the person who wants to, let's say we're doing a change of use and someone wants to move in and the owner doesn't really want to collaborate and he says, I don't really care. I prefer not to, rather just keep my place empty. Does that mean that the person moving in is now going to be required to do that, or?
Well, once again, both applicant and property owner sign it. So sign the application to the
Right.
planning board, and it would reach in the case you just suggested.
Yeah.
It would go to the planning board, and all parties would be required to act in accordance with this, and yes, that would turn into a mandate, yes.
Unless they decided not to move forward, then if you said, this
that's
is what it would
true.
require. Well, I don't feel like paying X number of dollars in sidewalks, so we just won't do that.
That's true, and actually, I could see, yes, I can envision, that happening, although that already happens without us even having these policies, but yes, your point's well taken.
I'm just thinking. I'm just playing advocate.
Yeah, no, but it's.
On the covering paragraph, paper, third paragraph says, adoption of this policy. It is a policy, it is not law. We are not required to have a hearing on this. Adoption of this policy resolution will support the village's objectives and will improve prospects for various funding sources. There's
Okay.
nothing that says you must widen the sidewalk unless we change the village law and say sidewalks will be 10 feet wide.
Well,
What
here's, but Brian's point, just to refer to that, Brian's point is well taken. What it would do is, in any case where you came before the planning board, or if the village DPW was undertaking something, well, again, I don't
even
know.
think of that.
I don't know what the penalty. In other words, I don't know that there's punishment for not adhering to it. What it would mean is that we might end up not following it and actually removing it and withdrawing it. In other words,
This doesn't bind us to a thing.
no, but
Not
it doesn't.
even a thing. It doesn't
it
bind
does-
us to do anything.
That, except for one thing, though. In other words, a wait to go through a waiver process where anyone,
But
including
there's
us,
not,
doesn't
but
need
this, Sally's right, it's not in the code, it's not in the planning process, it's not part of secret. And we adopt this as a statement of principles, it doesn't bind the planning
Okay.
board to do.
And
To
going
do
the
the thing,
other way,
yeah.
you're in trouble if you haven't adopted this and you're required for a grant application. You'll have adopted it.
Yes, this will help. This will be helpful in that respect. I should mention that the waiver process is only in here because it's required to have as part of a compliant policy resolution. That's why this waiver process, case-specific exceptions to the New Paltz Complete Streets policy shall be considered on an individual basis. Well, obviously, that's for those who don't wanna do it, the waiver process is gonna be another,
Don't do it.
yeah.
But if you don't do it, then you're not part of the complete streets.
No, I mean, you'd either grant the waiver,
Right.
which of course is going to annoy some parties to right there,
Right.
and then you could either grant it or not. And actually, I would not like to see the village board inundated with waiver requests from this policy resolution. That would be a failure of sorts of the policy.
Then we'll withdraw it at that time.
We could, and nothing would stop us from doing that. We're not. There's no contract here with this organization.
All right, well, all in favor?
I
Aye.
I'm gonna have to say no
You're
right
paying for
now.
the sidewalks.
All right, so motion fails?
Sorry. I mean, I
All right,
I think
I think, Katie, did
I think we just use more discussion,
Mm-hmm.
and I think we can move forward with it because I do agree with most of these things, but I just
Okay.
want to have a firmer grasp on it.
Understood. Yeah.
Sally, did I,
Right.
sorry, Katie, did I move the zoning definitions resolution? I move that we adopt the resolution regarding zoning definitions.
Second,
All in favor?
uh,
Aye.
that's setting the hearing.
Yep, so then the hearing for March 27th.
Just make sure
I'm sorry,
people
what was
realize
that?
we're changing the date.
The zoning definitions we had previously decided would be April 10th.
And that's
On
what
the-
this
on the
resolution
20th.
changes it.
Changes it to 27th.
That's fine, as long as we're,
I knew-
Yep.
TEA.
I knew-
we have enough
Yeah.
time.
And we did the meters and spots, right? That's
Yep.
done? No, Brian, no.
Prolific.
Brian?
No.
Hey, Brian?
Brian,
Oh,
Brian,
sorry. What?
do you have a number for us for the
Oh.
resolution?
I rewrote it. I can just provide this. If everyone wants to just
Alright,
look at it super briefly.
I'll move the resolution and, as
As I
amended,
amended.
as amended by Brian.
Yeah.
wait a second, I have to see if I approve because it's my resolution to begin with. And I don't wanna get mine fouled up.
Oh, that thing about bulldozing
Okay.
Sally's house.
Katie's gonna need to,
Why?
Just straighten out that curve, yes.
Awkward.
Okay,
To widen it.
all in favor?
I
Aye. Sorry, Kurt, please, the B3?
Yes.
just a second, would you send to Mr. Morana, the DOT guy,
Yes.
Good
say
guy.
that we have done the resolution, we've
It's-
also
it's
set the
everywhere.
hearing
Yeah.
date for,
It may be short and sweet, but.
Yes.
I literally saw someone
Alright.
tag
Kurt?
garbage can last week.
One quick housekeeping thing, just, could you please get the local laws that came from your department into our standard local law form for Katie tomorrow, because she has to have them available to the public. Just
Okay.
to drop it into the, whatever, just,
Which, all the initiatives on the agenda?
well,
or-
everything that came from you, yeah,
Okay.
it should be in the local law number X of 2000, all the, just
The
the
hearing.
boilerplate.
Yeah.
And
Drop
it
it in
needs
the
to have the
boilerplate.
hearing cover.
If you don't have one, I'll send you a Microsoft Word local law.
You have, and I do, yeah, so you have previously.
Alright, so please, the B3, now we've already been through the general conversation ad nauseum, but this is specifically in reference to your meetings with the DBA and allied folks.
That's correct.
So I guess, you don't have to read through all 15 points, because we have it here in front of us, but just give us the overview and
Sure.
what changes you recommended in the B3 law as a result of it?
Sure. Actually, to cut right to the chase, right now I am not recommending any changes as a result of the group's meeting. The group had a lot of commentary. Some of this stuff does overlap with the county comments that I've just received, and I asked if I might have till Friday that I believe I could get it done for next Wednesday's meeting. Yes, because I know that's,
And then we could
that's a
have a
top
full
priority.
discussion.
We could just set the public hearing tonight, but please continue.
Yes, and you don't have the law as amended to comport with the county stuff in your hands. But suffice to say, I would like to, first of all, I'd like to thank very much the Julie Robbins for working with me to organize the group, and her help was indispensable. What can I say? Also, Ariana, your trustee, was also the liaison and attended each meeting. It was a series of 3 meetings that originated from a request by the village board that we reconvene this group that had met once or twice previously about this district. Many people were invited, many people showed up to at least one, if not all 3 of these meetings. A lot of these recommendations there were no votes taken on these recommendations. I didn't think, it was a little less formal than that. But what I took away, among other things, was that at least some of the owners of property and businesses that participate in this group are concerned about the elimination of vehicle repair uses that are currently allowed in that district. We have several vehicle repair establishments on that stretch of road. They certainly understood that being legally non-conforming does not force you at any time to cease and desist that use. It affects your ability to open a new shop. It affects your ability to expand an existing shop, and there were other concerns they had, and they pertain to those things that an owner of such facilities would know best, and that is that, yes, it is possible that a bank might identify it as legally non-conforming rather than an allowable use as of right, and therefore I suppose they could that could affect their decision on providing a loan.
That is one of my questions. Non-conforming use is not really a true statement, because that use was in place before anything else.
Yes.
Okay, so it's not a non-conforming use, it's a grandfathered permitted use.
Grandfathered is the most common vernacular used to
I
state
think
pre-existing
That would
non-conforming
be a
use.
better term than non-conforming.
Okay, it doesn't, grandfathered
There's
doesn't,
synonyms. There's synonyms.
the only thing is,
Not for the bank.
Hmm?
Uh,
well, I wouldn't
no,
know, I
because-
mean,
A non-conforming use means you're doing something in,
Pre-existing non-conforming is a
it's
synonym for
pre-exist,
grandfather.
it's a pre-existing.
the only thing is that these are terms defined by, in state statutes that all municipalities have to adhere to. So if we were to totally eliminate that in favor of the term grandfather, one, I don't have any reason to believe that the owners in question who raised this would feel differently about it, or do I have any knowledge that banks would look at it differently?
Okay. Because it is the business we're talking about is the oldest business still in business in New Paltz.
Well, that's among the several that exist. I mean, there may be one that is the oldest business in New Paltz, but there are several.
Right, there are several, but one of them is the oldest.
Mm-hmm.
It
Yeah.
continually existing businesses in the Bronx. And I think, you know, we worry about the historic district, we worry about building. I think we also ought to worry about businesses that have been loyal.
Well, we certainly should.
This
It-
law
here-
wouldn't stop an existing business from continuing its operation.
It would stop it from expanding that continually.
It would make it much more difficult to
Yeah.
expand. It would place a
I
higher
think that's
burden
not right.
on the expansion.
Well, we can't rewrite all of our zoning principles for a single business in one
No,
district.
but this is a new zone that we're creating.
But as we go forward and rezone the entire village,
Uh,
we can't be held up by, I mean, yes, you're absolutely right, of course, but does that good outweigh everything else, all the other good that we're doing?
No, but I think.
This is how zoning works. When you change the conditions, anything that doesn't fit them in every district in the village, that's just how it works. Pre-existing we have tons of them. They're all over the place. The entirety of Lower Main Street is pre-existing non-conforming. If there was a fire tomorrow and if the Thesis fire had spread to downtown, you could not build the B-store right next to Groovy Wood. It's pre-existing non-conforming. We can't rebuild downtown the way it is now.
No,
So it's a
that's not my.
yes, there are other hurdles, but they're hurdles that might be worthwhile. Is all I'm saying.
And I'm not disagreeing with you, but what I'm saying is, I've got a non-conforming business, okay, which I am now saying, even though you pre-existed before I decided to create a new zone, I'm not going to allow you to expand that non-conforming business. And that's my question.
Wouldn't you have the same problem with the zoning board though, even if you didn't have a new
You get a
zone?
variance.
You still have to get a variance to expand it,
Right.
right?
It's the same process.
No, under normal circumstances, you would not need
But
a
the
ZBA.
ZBA can give a variance
The
to.
ZBA can, that's not the question I'm raising, Stuart.
Well,
I'm not raising that, I'm saying that if I have a business that is in a conforming use and you come along and make it a non-conforming use in a new zone, I am precluded from expanding on-site that non-conforming business, and I
Without
don't
variance.
think that should be allowed.
Without a variance. You could go to the ZBA and get a variance to expand on site.
But I don't think you should be required to do that.
I understand what you're saying. This
Is there a
again,
solution?
not anything that would satisfy all interests. In other words,
We
first
can
of
either
all,
rezone the B3 the way we envision it, or we can do what you're suggesting. One or the other.
I wanna do what we envisioned it, allowing for what I'm saying.
well, let's put it this way. The question was asked, to give you an example, the question was asked during one of these meetings. The question was asked, can we make it so we're considered conforming as existing vehicle repair businesses, but have that not apply to new, and you can't, that's
No.
simply
Okay.
unconstitutional. So we don't have that option. That was one that was
Okay.
suggested among the
That,
group.
I don't like that option anyway.
Right, and,
So
and
we could allow all car businesses still,
No,
but that defeats the purpose.
Right.
to be honest with you, I mean, in a way, I thought it didn't work this way, but I thought that perhaps owners of these types of uses in that corridor might enjoy the monopoly that we're inadvertently giving them, but no.
Well, that may be for a different, who knows? I just
Yeah.
asked my question because I think, and I have another related one to that, and that is Village Pizza, which has a drive-through.
Yes, it does, yeah.
And what are you gonna do with that?
It's there
Well,
until it's not.
It's not, it's legally non-conforming.
So they can't do it anymore.
No,
Well, they
no,
can
they can
until
do it
until
forever.
they stop.
We can't force somebody
Oh.
to change.
Once they stop,
Yeah,
then they
right,
can't do it
exactly.
again.
But
They
they
can-
couldn't open another second lane.
Right,
They-
exactly.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And say your auto body shop that you have down there has been there for 120 years, long
Yep.
before the car. You have it for another 50 years. It's legally there. But
Right.
your daughter decides that when she inherits it, she wants to turn it into a hair salon. You can't ever go back and have it be the car dealership again.
I
Right.
understand
That's all.
that.
Okay.
But
You'd be hard
what I
pressed to add a
don't
second
understand
garage.
is, okay, I've been in business for 120 years,
Uh-huh.
and I have the business, and I want to put another bay
You'd be
On that
hard pressed to
business.
do that.
Hmm?
You would be hard pressed to do that.
That's what I think.
Well, I don't know, Mark, you just have to go through a process.
Well,
and ask.
but it wouldn't be as predictable as, let's say, approving
It's not as of right.
it's
It
not
means we need to
not
take-
as of right.
It means you wanna expand a use that we don't really want,
Right.
we wouldn't want any new ones, we have to double check that before we allow you to expand your car lot. That's all really it's saying, it goes to another level of process.
Yeah. And the question.
But you answered my question. I can't expand it as of right.
Not as of right,
Why not?
because alright, say we passed this law, right?
Yes.
Say, to simplify, say the B3 law of the building says that everything has to be 4-story mixed use with 100% lot coverage, just to something ridiculous.
Okay.
And you've got your car dealership in the middle of that.
And
right?
I've had it there.
And you've had it there forever, and it has been there. And what was your question?
That I can't expand it as of right.
Right, you can't expand it as of right. What it says is, well, we've made a policy in the best interest of the village as a whole for that area to be 4-story buildings with 100% lot coverage. You want to do something wildly different than what the elected officials decide is good in the best interest of the community.
No, I want
You may still be able to do that, but you can't just do it without checking with us first from now on.
No, I
That's what it
want to be able to continue my business and grow as the community grows.
Mhm.
And I find that I have the land, I mean, I have all the things required, and I just wanna add on an extra bay.
Well, then you might want to look at.
Then you have to go to the ZBA and ask for the variance.
Right.
Say, look, I know that everything else is forces and 100% lot coverage, but you go to ZBA and make that argument. Look, I've been here for 50 years, it's a thriving business, I'm looking
But
to
why
do just
should
one
I
day.
have to drive
For the same reason that we send everybody to the ZBA, because there's certain things that require a heightened level of scrutiny. And we would be establishing this heightened level because we're shifting
We
the
changed our
purpose of that
mind,
area.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, we're changing our minds for other people.
Yes.
And what
we
I
do
wanna
like the
say
difference.
is, I think it's fine for us to change our mind,
Mm-hmm.
but not for other people.
Well, so what we do.
All right,
Oh,
there's
okay, but why is that one person more important than the 30 other people in that zone?
Well, I think
No?
if you've got another business, okay, that wants to expand and they have been there, a new business, non-conforming business shouldn't be allowed in the new zone.
Probably
But the
won't be.
businesses that are there under the same ownership,
Are allowed to continue in operation.
and
for
they
long.
should be able to expand.
There is one thing. I can plug in my computer and
Does
look at
this
the
make
code for us.
sense?
But look, I know you don't. I know you want
the
the comment.
problem is that you can't pass a law to make it different if you let the people who are there now expand to do something that you wouldn't let anybody else do. That's
Why? They've been there, I'm
no, but
imposing
they're
on
there.
them.
They're there and they can still do what they have done forever. But if they're going to expand it, then they're going to have to get a variance. Otherwise, you can't really pass a law to keep other people from doing the same thing because that would be kind of discriminating against them. The new
No,
ones.
I think it's the other way around. I think we are discriminating against people. I'm in favor of the new zone, but I also want not to discriminate against people who are in business now and have been in business
We're not discriminating against
and
them.
will continue to be in business. Yes, because we're saying it is not their right to expand.
Well, actually, wait. But
We're not
there
saying
is.
they can't do it. We're saying they can't do it without permission.
Well,
And,
All right, but there is. all right, there is.
that's a
Wait.
big difference because look, you have
But-
you no, hear me out. No, Si, this is important. You have been working a lot on a parking plan.
Yep.
Which just forces people to pay the fine that we set for them, whether they want to or not, and they can choose to move somewhere else. Every law we pass discriminates in the broader sense of the term, is in terms of choosing between options. So we can't with the one hand say, all we're doing is saying that you need to ask permission to expand a use that is inappropriate for that area.
by my definition, saying it's inappropriate.
Yeah, we're the ones who are elected by the community to make those decisions.
But what I'm.
We're
but
the
see,
only
I-
ones in New Boston who can make that call right
See,
now.
I don't disagree. New business wants to come in and it doesn't fit the bill.
If you don't like people having to ask permission, then we need to eliminate building permits. We need to eliminate the
No,
planning board, the
That's
zoning.
no,
Those are all.
now you're taking
No,
it
I'm
too
not.
far.
This is what I'm saying. This is good. This is good process. That's why we set up structures like the building inspector and the planning board and the ZBA, to make those decisions, and why we interview people to make those calls of, should we let this person expand or not? There's very little allowed by right in the village whatsoever, and we've just eliminated the last of it. Remember, because until last year, you could build a single-family home as of right, no more, according to this board. This village board agreed that you have to ask permission to build a single-family home from now on.
But that was.
We have, and that's every residence in New Paltz, not just one little
But that
store
was
in
for
B3.
a
That's what I mean. The principle there is of permission is the point I'm making, not the specifics of your argument. That all zoning laws are about asking permission and about giving and making that decision
Right,
to
but
allow
you-
building or
but
not.
you- I think you're missing
What am
one
I?
point.
Okay, what am I missing?
My point is, I'm there.
Mm-hmm.
I have a business. I have done business faithfully
Mm-hmm.
there. Okay? Now you're coming along and telling me only these kinds of businesses are allowed, which I think is fine. And we want a new design, and I think that's fine. What I'm having trouble with is for those businesses that built there because they were permitted to do it, and they are still in business, and they want to expand and have the proper, I mean, they're not asking for
Mm-hmm.
exceptions,
Right.
they have the, whatever is required
Mm-hmm.
to expand. I think they should be allowed to do that as long as that business is still owned by the same people. Period.
We don't have the right to stipulate that. Again, non-conforming uses can be sold and carried on either from generation to generation. So and these
That's
are
a
things.
different problem.
Okay.
That's a different problem.
No, not right now. We public comments are sorry.
Um,
We're already
He was,
at
I
past
bet
end,
he was
sorry.
gonna support my position.
I will have some income on that, so I want to make a comment. That's all.
I mean,
What-
I mean, it's
Sally,
not,
I just don't
you
think.
don't, I
Yeah.
know how I feel, I
I
understand
do.
what you're saying.
I have something that might help. I need to double check our zoning, which I just plugged in my computer after the battery had been exhausted. So, but the point is that a lot of communities say that a non-conforming use may not be expanded by more than 50%, and I think that might address the
Well, yeah,
concerns.
so if you can confirm that, and maybe you and Sally could sit down and just make sure if
That
there is a
would be
way.
fine.
'Cause,
Right.
I don't know
solve
any
my
find out. If there's a way, great.
Right.
The other question, and this is why I'm not trying to shut you down, Rich. It's just that I think we're probably past it. Is that
He's
from
trying
what-
to explain to his dumb friend.
No, I'm trying to make sure I'm not making myself look like an idiot on TV. We have to wait for the county comments, or we have to revise this draft based on the county comments. You said you think this is in time for Friday noons for next Wednesday's workshop.
That's
right?
correct.
And is that the last thing we need before we can set a public hearing for this?
That's it.
I'm assuming that we all
That's it.
approve all the
The
changes.
county's not asking for another submission
Okay,
as long
yeah.
as we address their comments.
So that's
in
what I'm
some
saying, rather
fashion.
than, because I think a lot of this is stuff that we can't answer right here without annoying each other.
That'd be good to.
Or without having me run through the code a lot.
Yeah, so maybe we can tidy up
I
this.
am
plan-
content if you can do that,
Let's try to do, if you guys can tidy up that, you can get us the cleanup version.
then I'm good.
Next Wednesday, we can have hopefully the final conversation before we get the public formally involved. And hopefully aim to set a public hearing next Wednesday, and that would be, the minimum would be first meeting in April would be?
Yes, April 10th.
April 10th would be the soon
Oh,
as we
I
have a
want
public
one
hearing.
on April Fool's Day, it's
Is
always
that-
better.
Sound like a good way to go forward?
That sounds great.
Yeah, just.
Good.
And actually, that's it.
Is
Unless
there a way
I'll
to
make
make
a
a food truck of sorts?
I'll second. All in favor?
To build one. What are we doing?
Adjourning.
Adjourning.
Aye.
I guess so.
Thank you all.
What?
That will solve my problem.
Yeah, if that's legal, I didn't think that's legal. This is the first time I've heard that.